Raining and cold here today. Ah, Eureka. This meeting is being live streamed. So I can now call the meeting to order. No? I will wait till Kristen gives me the nod. Thank you, Director Clark. I would like to call this meeting to order. Recognize that collectively we are on the unceded and traditional territories of First Nations within our regional boundaries. And the electronic meetings policy follows. Committee of the whole meeting. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Any comments made during this meeting will form part of the public record. Public viewing of the meeting is also available in the SLRD boardroom in Pemberton. And in the SLRD boardroom, we have staff people, Philippa Campbell, and our NDIT intern, Leanne Steffen. Also, welcome to Ralph Forsyth. I should have said that right off the bat, our MOW alternate. Directors will be involved in and participate in the meeting. For the closed portion of the meeting, directors will confirm that they are alone and that the meeting can only be heard and seen by them if possible. If possible, directors will wear headphones for the closed portion of the meeting. Directors will identify themselves when advising the chair that they wish to be placed on the speakers list. This will be done by raising their hands or your little electronic hand on Zoom. The chair will record the order in which the hands are raised and will allow the directors to speak in the order in which they are recorded. If directors are unable to raise their hands due to being in audio mode, they will verbally advise the chair of their intention to speak. Directors will mute their device unless they wish to speak. The chair or the corporate officer may also mute the microphones, and the directors may unmute the microphones on their own accord when required. With respect to a vote, directors are only required to state a nay vote. You don't have to voice a yay vote. Directors attending the meeting are required to verbally advise the chair or the corporate officer if they leave the meeting and when they return to the meeting, so this can be recorded in the minutes. For clarity, if a director does not verbally advise the chair or the corporate officer, but is observed by the corporate officer to be absent from their video feed, and their video feed remains turned on, it's unclear to the corporate officer whether they are present in the meeting. The director will be marked absent from the meeting until such time as the corporate officer observes that the director has reappeared in the video feed. Directors will text message the chief administrative officer if they have a technical difficulty with their connection and need to be reconnected to the meeting. If directors are unable to text the CAO, the directors will email the CAO or chair. If a technical difficulty occurs resulting in the meeting not being projected on the wall display in the SLRD boardroom, the meeting will be recessed until the projection is reestablished. If a technical difficulty occurs and it becomes apparent that a director has become disconnected from the meeting and the meeting's quorum is not maintained, the meeting will be recessed until the director returns to the meeting. Okay, having said that, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Director Weed, seconded by Karen Elliott. Thank you. And now we go to the regional moment, Lillooet, BC, turning it over to Barb Weed.
Good morning. I don't know who's looking after the slides. I'm sure someone is, if they can put the first one up. I'm Barb Weed, a counselor here with the District of Lillooet, and I'm really thankful that we are doing this first thing this morning, so I don't have to carry my angst throughout the whole meeting. And we have no slides.
So 1 moment, Director Reid, my apologies. I was just being led into the meeting and I'm just sharing my screen now. There you go. Are the slides visible?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So this was my intro slide. So now you can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, today I will be providing a very brief picture of some of what is going on in Lillooet at the moment. Despite the challenges associated with the devastating wildfires and the ongoing pandemic, Lillooet community members have come together to bring about a variety of projects and developments. Next slide, please. I'd like to emphasize the community engagement associated with the SWIMS campaign, the hard work of the volunteers, and the generosity of sponsors. SWIMS volunteers, SWIMS ambassadors, and the SWIMS board put in numerous hours and efforts to make this campaign a success. They held raffles, they had prize draws at events, booths all around town, and to cap it off, a widely successful and fun Swim to Survive and Swimathon event. Over 170 pool passes were sold, with 11 passes won on a spin the wheel and 6 passes purchased on behalf of a person or family in need. Next slide, please. So the very first fundraiser began on January 1st, 2021, and that was before there was even an agreement or an okay with council that they were going to get this pool open. They went ahead and everybody was really optimistic. Folks taking out sponsorships for pool champions, to pool donors, to the Polar Bear Swim can see their names and faces or logos on the swimslillooet.ca website and in the lobby. Volunteers at numerous events, booths at the Bilo, the post office, the farmers market, encouraging folks to purchase passes, take out a sponsorship, spin the wheel, buy Purdy's chocolates, which I'm sure I gained 20 pounds. And then there were some creative campaigns. Sarah Petznick, who's up in the right-hand corner there, creatively started a campaign for people to vote to keep her hair, cut her hair, buzz off her hair, and she donated her hair to Wigs for Kids and donated the funds raised to SWIMS, and that amounted to $4,300. They also had a Get Fit Swim boot camp, which I'm proud to say I was not a part of, could not have even attempted to try that. It inspired people to come out and get ready. Julian Smith shared her skills in Tuesday Nia, which I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, it might be Naya, with intrepid Get Fit folks. Other young people and Andrea Nacy took young people through a dryland artistic swimming program. Next slide, please. Our sponsors really helped get over the top. And when I say us, I'm referring to SWIMS, not myself or council or mayor. The Statlium communities were the largest single donors to the Love Your Pool campaign, with Hoyston, Sequawash, Teaklet, Hawklip, and the Lillooet Friendship Center donating and fundraising over $54,000. Their support was greatly appreciated early in the campaign and helped everyone feel positive that they could reach their goals of $200,000. Our SLRD Area B Director, Vivian Birch-Jones, provided another $20,000, and local businesses, Lillooet Secondary, and individuals really inspired SWIMS to keep reaching higher. The community has loudly shown the District of Lillooet that the rec center is a prized resource, and they want to see it become a thriving, safe, inclusive, and fun place to be. It is now up to the community to come out and use the pool to the max, and the District of Lillooet and the rec center staff and lifeguard instructors to make it a great place to be. Next slide, please. So there was water safety and a spray park. Water safety was a huge success. The spray park was a huge success for families and youth coming out to learn how to stay safe around the water while having so much fun. Thanks to our partners, Yellowhead Community Services, First Nations Health Authority, Lillooet Regional Invasive Species, the SLRD Bear Aware, and to SWIMS and the Hub ambassadors. They recycled bottle drives from the fire camp. What a great campaign that was. A good day to build team spirit, reach the goal, and help the firefighters and the environment. And there was a lot of water bottles. The lifeguard training began, and congratulations to those who completed their lifeguard recertifications and to the new people who successfully took the 2 weeks of training to become lifeguards. The pool opened September 17th. Next slide, please. On another note, I'm pleased to report that the skate park revival project was a great success. We had to postpone building a concrete park due to COVID, forest fires, and funding, but we did rebuild our original wooden skate park, which had rotted out. So it's bigger. We have community youth engaged. They have a board down there that they can spray paint and put graffiti on, and it's very well used until we get the funding to go bigger and better. And then this one can be disassembled and donated to another community that needs a skate park. Next slide, please. The Lillooet Community Connect Hub had their grand opening and ribbon cutting, and I'm told it was a very small ribbon on September 24th. They were championed by the Lillooet Learning Community Society, or Lillooet Learns. The Area Community Connect Innovation Hub has been a concept a long time in the making. The hub focuses on supporting a Lillooet-grown, Lillooet-made, Lillooet Places business model. The hub provides hands-on training, mentorship, and apprenticeship programs in the agriculture, arts, and tourist sectors to benefit workers, business owners, and the community. The hub will enhance existing businesses, grow new businesses, and help steward new innovative social enterprises for another nonprofit organizations and generate a welcoming and supportive environment for new businesses to locate to Lillooet. Next slide, please. So we've gone from what was Mel's Diner to the hub, and they now have a sign up. I should have got a more recent picture. As you can see, the space on Main Street enjoyed a significant update, and the bright facade is a welcome change in the downtown core. The logo is finalized and up, and like I say, I should have gotten a more recent picture. The hub's mission is to build an inclusive, healthy, safe, equitable, and thriving community that is able to take risks where individuals can listen, speak, learn, lead, and create the conditions necessary to make an impact in the community. The hub could be a vehicle for putting reconciliation into practice and enhancing relationships between Statlium communities and other rural communities. Through joint project development and implementation, by working together, we build trust and create opportunities to learn and grow together. Next slide, please. The Freeman Awards. This was postponed for 2 years and finally happened. The recipients finally took place on August 14th. It was very well attended. We welcomed an opportunity to honor the community members that have donated their time and efforts for decades to improve quality of life for Lillooet residents. And I'm pretty sure you can see the Area B director there. And I'm not sure if the SLRD knows, but before she was an Area B director, she was always doing something for this community, and it was greatly appreciated. Next slide, please. Our brand new official community plan is now a reality. It was adopted on October 26th. Our last OCP was completed in 2009, so we were well overdue to revisit it. And I'd like to thank Director Pettengill for the kind words on the strength of our commitment to working with First Nations. It really was a whole community that pushed for it. Consistent feedback showed the town really does want to do well with truth and reconciliation. Next slide, please. Thank you for this opportunity. If you're ever in Lillooet, come and enjoy our pool and our rec center and all the new things to come. And nobody can ask questions.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Well done, Barb.
Thank you.
That was great, Bob. Who knew?
No,
Nobody down this part of the region. That would be real news for them.
very nicely done. And it's quite heartening to hear all that good news. Yeah.
Our town really is run by mayor and council to a certain, but so many volunteers. You really, I don't even know if doors would open here without volunteers. It's amazing.
Okay, thank you. The next item, number 4, is a delegation from Metro Vancouver Regional District. By any chance, are they sitting in the waiting room? Ms. Clark? Sal Dow? Okay, let's move along. You have a tough act. Welcome, Metro Vancouver Regional District people. Heather, Sherry, Sav Dhaliwal. Yep. Vivian Birch-Jones, I'm the chair today in place of Jen. I'm the vice chair, in fact. Would you like to proceed with your presentation?
Thank you. I'll just check, is my mic working?
Yes,
Same here. Can you hear me, Kirsten?
indeed.
Yeah. Good morning. I think we can proceed. Can we now, Chair?
Please go ahead. Yep.
Thank you. Before I proceed with introductions, I wish to respectfully acknowledge that the Metro Vancouver region's residents live, work, and learn on the shared territories of the many Indigenous peoples, including 10 local First Nations. And since we are online, I wish to thank all of the other nations on whose territories we are located. Today, for making this meeting possible for us, we honor the many territorial keepers of these lands and waters around us since time immemorial. My name is Sav Dhaliwal. I'm joining you today in my role as chair of the Metro Vancouver Regional District Board. I'm also Burnaby City Councillor. And joining me today is Jerry Deborah-Wolney, our Commissioner and CEO, and Heather McNell, General Manager of Planning and Housing Services. We appreciate the opportunity to present Metro 2050, the draft updates to the Metro Vancouver's Regional Growth Strategy to you, the members of the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District Board. As local government officials in the Metro Vancouver region, we share the honor of serving our communities, helping them to thrive today while also shaping how they will change over time. We are blessed to live in the Lower Mainland, a part of the province that is as beautiful as it is abundant. And together we share healthy ecosystems, a vibrant local economy, and strong and resilient communities. We've all benefited from the thoughtful and sometimes difficult choices made by those local government leaders who came before us. They made wise, long-range planning decisions like protecting critical conservation areas, preserving agricultural land, and investing in public transit when cities across North America were building highways. Their foresight and their regional plans helped us to set us for success. Now it's our turn to make those thoughtful decisions about how our region will change over time. Our challenges are many: a limited land base, high housing prices, and rapid population growth. We know we must do better in terms of helping all people in our region to thrive, regardless of age, income, or background. And climate change is undoubtedly the greatest challenge of our time. That's what Metro 2050 represents to me. And as our neighbor, we are interested in what you think and how we can work together and to find solutions to common challenges. As we look towards the year 2050, I hope you share my optimism that if we continue to work together, as two regional district interests in shaping a living, sustainable, and resilient Lower Mainland for the benefit of our children and grandchildren. With that, I will turn it over now to Jerry Deborah-Wolney. Jerry?
Thank you very much, Chair Dhaliwal, and good morning, everybody. As you heard, my name is Jerry Deborah-Wolney. I'm the Commissioner and the Chief Administrative Officer here at Metro Vancouver. Part of the reason that I'm here today is to emphasize to you how important this 80-page plan is to everything that we do at Metro Vancouver. How we plan for projected growth and land use in the region has a massive impact, for better or for worse, on our other responsibilities as local governments, including the regional utilities and services that are provided by Metro Vancouver. So it's an important document for land use planning across the region, as well as our corporate planning. In presenting to you as our neighbor to the north, I would like to highlight how Metro 2050 addresses two important issues for the Metro Vancouver Board: resiliency and climate action. The past 2 years have highlighted the importance of planning for a resilient region and in taking action on climate change. For example, the challenge of COVID has taught us the essential value of protecting our conservation and recreation lands and making sure that we expand our parkland to meet the growing popularity of our parks and trails. And our experience this summer with its extreme heat, drought, and rampant wildfire demonstrate that climate action and planning for resilience cannot be delayed, which is why we are committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050 and building communities that are more resilient to natural hazards and extreme weather. The Metro Vancouver Board and staff will benefit from your input. It will help to make the final version of Metro 2050 that much better. We're listening and we want to hear your input on the draft presented to you today. So now I'll hand it over to Heather McNell to walk through this morning's presentation. Heather?
Thanks so much, Jerry, and thank you, Chair and Committee. And I guess you folks are advancing slides for us, so much appreciated. We can go forward too, I think. There we go, perfect. So the aim of today's presentation is really just to quickly provide you with an overview of the content and the draft of the update to the regional growth strategy, with an aim to helping the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District prepare to provide comments. Next slide, please. As you are very familiar with, a regional growth strategy is a long-range policy plan that covers any issue that the regional federation together decides needs to be tackled regionally. And it's defined in the Local Government Act, and it requires that all affected local governments, including adjacent regional districts, must accept the regional growth strategy. In Metro Vancouver, we have a long history of regional planning going back decades, and our current regional growth strategy is called Metro 2040, and it was signed on to by all affected local governments 10 years ago in 2011. Next slide. This regional growth strategy has served the region well, and that's why our board has scoped the update to build on the successes of the existing plan. So much of what you see in Metro 2040 will be ported directly into Metro 2050. But that being said, our board has given us direction to really take advantage of the fact that TransLink is updating the transportation strategy at the same time, so making sure that those two long-range plans are dovetailed. But also to apply what we've learned over 10 years of implementation. And as Jerry spoke about, to really tackle some of the critical changes that are and challenges that are facing our region today, including climate change, housing affordability, and social equity. Next slide. The process to update our regional growth strategy, like yours, it wasn't a short one. And so it began 2.5 years ago, and it included an engagement plan that was adopted by our board. We structured the update around 11 themed policy reviews. So think of each theme in the regional growth strategy, whether that's environment or transportation or housing. And we took stock of what was working well, where the gaps were, and where the opportunities were that we could improve how the plan supports local planning and our common planning objectives. As required, we struck an intergovernmental advisory committee, and it was made up of staff from all of our member jurisdictions, local First Nations, the province, TransLink, and your staff, so adjacent regional districts, and other stakeholders. And they were really key to helping us develop the content in the update, as well as review that on a goal-by-goal basis. Next slide. The draft of Metro 2050 was presented to the Metro Vancouver board for referral out for comment in June of this year, and that kicked off a 5-month comment period. And so we're in the midst now of doing the roadshow to all of our member councils and to boards of adjacent regional districts. And this update, as that you will see, is crafted based on requests and input from our members. So we heard over that 2 years how this could serve better the members and the IAC and other subject matter experts. It's still structured around a whole set of actions that are for Metro Vancouver as an organization, for members, and for TransLink. Next slide. Regional projections for population, housing, and employment are a critical part of the regional growth strategy and a core service that we provide to our members, to TransLink, and to our utilities. They are projections, and in this regional growth strategy, we emphasize that they are not targets. The intent is to provide information to decision makers across the region on what growth we think you can anticipate based on a set of assumptions about the future and past trends. As you can see, the update really thinks that we're still going to continue to be a growing region, adding about 35,000 people a year net gain to the region. And that growth is primarily driven by immigration. We recognize that this growth does not stop at the Metro Vancouver boundary and that it has impacts, obviously, on adjacent regional districts. We know that Squamish-Lillooet Regional District is facing your own growth pressures, and this is why it's so important that our long-range plans align well and complement each other as much as possible. It also speaks to the benefits of the ongoing dialogue and sharing what we learn. I know my staff has learned from the experience of your staff in terms of updating the regional growth strategy there. Next slide. So moving quickly into the content, Metro 2050 is still structured around 5 goals that reflect long-standing regional planning principles to ensure that we can accommodate that growth that I just spoke about in a way that protects the values of the Federation. Next slide. And although the majority of the content in Metro 2050 has been carried forward directly from Metro 2040, there are a couple of improvements that I'd like to highlight briefly. So we heard from our member jurisdictions that they wanted greater clarity on better understanding the characteristics of locations where the plan is directing growth to the network of urban centers and along transit corridors. And so Metro 2050 proposes new types of centers to address that request. We also have stronger alignment between planned locations for growth and transit investment through a new tool that we're calling major transit growth corridors. And we also heard from our members that a great role for the regional growth strategy to play is to set aspirational regional scale targets that we can all work towards together within the context of each local community. And the first of those is a 15% is that 15% of new and redeveloped housing in transit-oriented locations be affordable rental housing. And I know you have a similar target in your plan. Next slide. There's also a whole host of policies to help the region address the housing crisis that we're facing, including regional policies to encourage transit-oriented affordable housing, to increase housing stock overall, and to protect existing non-market rentals. We have policies that are offering stronger protection of certain types of industrial land, particularly those that are more trade enabling in nature, but also greater flexibility for affordable rental housing near rapid transit stations on employment lands. There are new climate action policies, including collective actions for us all to work together to meet those really ambitious greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. But also, for the first time, the plan is tackling adaptation as well, so helping us better prepare for the impacts of climate change that we're already keenly feeling in our region. There are two more aspirational targets that are environmentally focused in the plan. So to protect 50% of the land base for nature, and we're at about 40% in Metro Vancouver right now, and also to achieve 40% tree canopy cover within the urban containment boundary, and we're at about 32% right now. Our board has asked us to better consider how our policies impact different parts of and different segments of our population, and to seek better equity outcomes, and also to place more emphasis on building relationships with First Nations and ensuring that their development and planning needs are integrated into the plan. Next slide. We're nearing completion. There's a number of policies in Metro 2050 that support our shared interests as adjacent regional districts, including looking at how we can integrate interjurisdictional transportation connections, taking steps to expand the supply of affordable housing, efforts to protect and enhance sensitive ecosystems, and a variety of approaches to supporting more resilience, as Jerry spoke about, to natural hazards while reducing GHG emissions. We continue to have efforts to protect our industrial land base and identifying new opportunities to further protect certain kinds of industrial lands through a trade-oriented overlay. And I know this is also a concern for Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. We have a policy to focus growth in urban centers and along transit corridors. And that really is hoping that more people can live closer to their place of work, minimizing the need to commute by car for long distances. We're very live to the fact that there are more and more super commuters driving back and forth between our two regions, and we want to help to address that by providing more affordable housing options in Metro Vancouver. And we also have new policies in the plan to improve our level of collaboration, cooperation, and dialogue on shared interests, particularly around interregional transportation connections. Next slide. So just wrapping up, we're in the midst of this 5-month comment period, as I mentioned. The comment period closes on November 26th and we're asking for comments via board resolution. We're also providing opportunities throughout this time for residents, businesses, nonprofits, and others to provide comment via an online feedback form. And we just held a public webinar with over 200 people participating. Next slide. Following the comment period, we'll be assessing alignment and where the pinch points still are. And if all is going well, our board has given us direction to really try to get this update completed before this local election cycle is up. And so we're hoping that we would conduct first bylaw reading in probably February of next year, and hoping to have this wrapped up by July. Next slide. And that's really it. So we're thanking you again for having us here to present today. And thank you again to your staff who have extensively contributed their time and energy and expertise in helping us to shape the draft that you see before you today. And we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Well done, and thank you very much. I open it up to questions, comments. Mr. Forsyth, Director Forsyth, go ahead.
So much for your presentation. There was one slide where you talked about the growth, and just did quickly the math. I could be off, but it looked like 2050 a population of 3.8 million with an increase of roughly 1.1 million. But on the housing side, it said there was only going to be 600,000 new homes. So I just wondered how you reconcile the math there.
Oh, it's just the size of the household. Thank you for your question. So it's just assuming a household size of just under 2 people per household.
Okay, great. So I thought, Matt, you got a $400,000 deficit there. Thanks.
Director Elliott?
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today, giving us this overview. Are there any policy statements about the 15-minute neighborhood goal? So trying to meet more services where people are?
Thanks so much for the question. And through the chair, yes, we haven't referenced the term 15-minute neighborhood, but we do have sort of standard planning radius around a lot of our transit. So we look at a 400-meter radius and a 1,000-meter radius. And so a lot of that is captured in some of our affordable housing near transit policies, for example. So really focusing in those good transit-rich locations. And so that would be what we call a frequent transit development area that's submitted by our member jurisdiction, approved by TransLink and our board, and then a whole host of work happens to put jobs and housing in those locations. So it's all about walkability and access to nature and affordable housing and jobs in those locations. And
then just a quick follow-up. What is included in the goal around 50% of the land base being left in a does that include like parks, or does it have to be naturalized areas?
Thanks so much. It's naturalized areas, but it can be parks, protected areas. Some of our crown lands are in there. So the layer was developed by our GIS folks, but in consultation with members. And the intention is following a global nature needs half kind of movement that's scientifically based, that's the percentage of land that's required for healthy, thriving ecosystems in the region. So that's what it includes.
And Chair, I just have one more question. We talk about the interconnectedness of our regions, and we are, all of us here, working on keeping our people at home, so putting jobs in our own community that support them. But where, I guess, have you paid any attention to the fact that we are the weekend playground area for much of Metro Vancouver, and when we're drowning is actually on the highway is on weekends? Primarily. And so does the plan contemplate not just the commuter, but moving people into their recreational habitats in a more sustainable way, I guess?
Thanks so much for the question. And we hear that on the North Shore of Metro Vancouver as well, is that they become the recreational place for most of our region. But yes, we're alive to the fact that then we're also traveling into Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. So we're looking at sustainable modes of transportation regardless of the type of trip. But definitely when we're looking at interjurisdictional movement, we're looking not just on weekdays and commuters, but how we can manage traffic as a whole.
Maybe I'll just add through the chair, that's certainly our approach with our regional park network throughout the region. Working with TransLink over the past year, we've dramatically increased access by transit to our most popular parks, and certainly support doing that interregionally as well.
Good to hear. Director Pettingill.
Thanks. And I had a look at the plan in July, and it's a lot of really strong stuff in there. The one thing in section 1.2.24, which I guess provides direction to regional context statements for members, it says consider support for the provision of childcare spaces, et cetera, and consider the implementation of green infrastructure. And I guess I was wondering, given some of the challenges we're facing, is the reason why we didn't choose stronger language like require or something a little something beyond just consider?
Thanks so much. And through the chair, we are looking at recognizing that our member jurisdictions are doing great work already. And so this is really reflecting that work is already being undertaken. And so we struggled with the language around that and went to the will of our members to much of this. And recognizing the importance of green infrastructure and recognizing the importance of the other issues that are brought up in that policy, and looking for ways for our members to show and demonstrate how they're considering those in their OCPs.
Maybe through the chair, I'll just add on the issue of green infrastructure. We've been doing work with a number of Dutch companies, including Deltaris and some others, Next year, we're going to have a large workshop for all of our members on best practices from around the world. And I'm happy to invite your staff as well if there's interest in joining our groups, just to learn from others. I think we all have areas where we're leading, and we all have areas where we can learn. And so we'll extend that invitation as well if there's interest.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just for some additional context, one of the thoughts in the back of my mind is the more we push you, the more you push us, and hopefully we all get to a better place faster. And in that light, to the other piece, I was wondering about language to suggest avoiding fossil infrastructure. So avoiding new gas lines and those sorts of things. Just wondering if you've had discussion about that, if there are thoughts about that.
I'm not aware in the context of the plan, but in general, I mean, our overall corporate priorities are push to be carbon-free by 2050. It has us on a very ambitious, aggressive path. The board has not taken a firm policy around investments. It is something we're looking at, but not as yet. But I'd certainly say that it's a theme that you'll see that's a core value throughout all of our documents, including Metro 2050. It's a core approach to our utility planning, our new sewage treatment plants treat the sewage as a resource to be mined for heat, for nutrients, et cetera. And so, but we don't have a specific policy related to the fossil fuel industry as of yet.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Oh, I see Director Rainbow. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. One of our major goals at the moment is to develop a transit system from Mount Currie right way through to Vancouver. We're working with BC Transit in the north part of the corridor, and then as we get closer, we get past Lions Bay, we're into the TransLink area. So I guess my question would be, can you or will you support us in our efforts to develop a transit system, and what could that support look like? What might we expect from you?
Certainly, it's very consistent with our goals and objectives as a region. We are having more formal and frequent discussions between Metro, TransLink, and the province. And I think there's absolutely a reason to include the adjacent regional districts, yours as well as Fraser Valley Regional District in that. It's included in the provincial planning, but hasn't been explicitly included in TransLink and Metro in the past. And so that table has just started to form. And I think combining the adjacent regional districts makes a lot of sense for those discussions. So at least we could have unified planning.
Okay, thank you.
Chair?
Very good. I hear Director Crompton, and then I think we'll end it there after Jack.
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering how granular the OCP gets. Do you recommend, you talk about rental housing, but do you recommend residential rental tenure zoning to the region as something that should be or must be applied?
Thank you for the question. No, what we've asked in the plan is for members to utilize the tools that they choose to use and show and demonstrate how they're working towards achieving affordable rental housing near transit. And so some of that might be through inclusionary policies, some of that might be rental tenure, but the tool that they choose to use is up to them, but to demonstrate movement towards the objective.
Great, thank you. And to my colleague's point just now about our transit system, it will terminate in Metro Vancouver. So one way that you could support is to be a part of our commission. And that would be a very clear and concrete way to acknowledge that this transit system will be a service both to the Sea to Sky and to Metro Vancouver. So invitation is there, and I'm sure my colleagues would join me in making that invitation.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I mean, it makes total sense. Unless the system was only to be one way, it's certainly of use. And I'm joking, it would certainly be of use for all of us and provide tremendous benefit.
Thanks for the presentation.
This is, great presentation, good process. We'll be providing some comments, and we'll end it there. We have another delegation, I do believe.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for receiving us.
You're ready, Philippa, and Ms. Clark, I think we can go ahead. Kyle Rosenkey. Thank you. I'm welcoming Jeff Cross and Andrew McCurran. Please go ahead on your TransLink Transport 2050 presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm sorry, I'm just having difficulty getting my camera started. See, are we good there? There we go. Thank you. I'm Jeff Cross. I'm the Vice President of Planning and Policy at TransLink, and with me is my colleague Andrew McCurran, who's the Director of Strategic Planning and Policy. We're really thrilled to be here and spend a reasonable amount of time with you. I appreciate that you carved out up to 60 minutes, I think, Chair. Is that still work for you as from a timing perspective?
Up to and not a minute longer. Thank you.
Okay, we can do that. We can even aim for shorter. But actually, this is a really important time, and I also appreciate that this was paired with the presentation from Chair Dhaliwal and our colleagues at Metro Vancouver, because these two strategies work very closely together and are mutually reinforcing. So we are in the final engagement period here for this strategy, and we're going to walk through it. The approach today I know you got the material in advance. There's quite a bit in this deck. We'll go quite lightly over it and give you the kind of key themes from it between Andrew and I, and then open it up and hopefully have an opportunity for some discussion and further questions. We're seeking your input on this as it relates to especially not just what happens within Metro Vancouver, but the connections to the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. Next slide, please. So reconciliation is the key theme in this document. We've been working very closely with the Indigenous Advisory Committee of the 10 urban First Nations that have territory within our service area. I know there are many more with historical territories both in and around the region. I'm personally coming today from the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh unceded and traditional territories, which I'm humbly work and play from. Next slide. So we'll do a couple of things very quickly, what this strategy does, then the strategy on a page and kind of the key themes and lenses for it. And then between Andrew and I will tag team going through the strategies and actions. There's 126 of them. We're not going to obviously read them all out, but just highlight how they work together and what the intent is. And we will try and put a special lens on especially the implications for the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District and the residents and businesses within that. Next slide, please. So it is our long-range strategy that's prescribed by our legislation. TransLink's a creature of the province, like municipalities, regional district. It has a 30-year window. We're looking at 2050, which was a 30 plus when we started this back in 2018, but we're now, about 29 years. It must support our regional growth strategy and climate action plans, as well as economic and environmental plans from the province. Our previous plans, we do this every 5 years or so, or update, just like the regional growth strategies. But the really most major update hasn't been done since 1993, and we are coming to a completion on that as it relates to many of the major infrastructure, our rapid transit network, many of the policies and planning that have come forward from that. And it's been, in retrospect, that blueprint from 1993, which was called Transport 2021, and here we are, has been incredibly important and has been successfully played out over many decades. Next slide. So we've done this over the course of 3 phases from a consultation and engagement perspective. We started this in early 2019 from a staff perspective. We probably got slowed down by about 6 to 12 months because of COVID, but very quickly, after a few months of the pandemic, our policymakers recognized in conversation with the province that we actually really needed to complete the strategy as a blueprint for how we build back better. So we've been, since that time, really turning up the momentum on this. We went out last spring and did a pulse check on the major transformative moves that we had identified, what the goals and strategies were, to get a sense from the public, and felt like we were on track. And so now we have the full strategy. It has been the largest engagement we've ever done. Over 40,000 people have participated in this. Next slide. Next one, please. So on a page, this is what the actual strategy looks like. The theme of it is access for everyone, where we all have real choices that we can count on, that we can afford, that we can safely enjoy now and into the future. It's a 30-year strategy, but it obviously has to point to the things we need to do in the next 5, 10, 15 years to really be on that track. It picks up themes that I know are common between Metro Vancouver and your municipalities and district about affordability, climate, equity is a key issue. And another theme that we're dealing with in this is technology, both finding ways to harness and leverage technology, also trying to mitigate or ameliorate some of the impacts that may come from very affordable automated vehicles, things like that, that could actually end up increasing congestion. So there's more choices, more reliability, hopefully more options for living closer to complete communities, and then less emissions, less spent on transportation, and less time spent in congestion. You'll see at the bottom, we also have 3 strategic lenses. I talked about reconciliation earlier. Social equity is something we've advanced in partnership with Metro Vancouver and the province, who have partnered with us at a staff level and from the ministers responsible for TransLink, and then resilience in the face of both climate change, earthquakes, and other issues. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who will quickly run through kind of the key targets and then sort of themes, and we'll tag team some of the maps and other areas. Andrew?
Great, thanks, Jeff. So I'm assuming that you all will have read in detail the 100-page document and have it well memorized. So I don't, I'll just do an orientation, recognizing that you probably haven't had the chance to dive into it in detail, but there's a lot in here, and it's really organized around these 5 goals that Jeff just showed us. So I'll just pause on each of the goals and give you more of a sense of the flavor of the actions that are under each of the 4 strategies in each section. So convenient choices, we all have universally accessible choices, allowing us to conveniently connect to opportunities without needing to rely on a car. And the target here is that at least half of all passenger trips are made by walking, cycling, and transit by 2050. And that shared cars make up the majority of the remaining trips. So the next slide talks about there's 4 strategies in this section. The first one around active transport being the most convenient choice for shorter trips talks about walkable community design, land use planning, completing walking and cycling networks, making widespread access to shared micromobility like shared e-scooters and shared e-bikes. The second one, making transit the most convenient choice for longer trips. There's quite a lot of discussion in this section around the importance of transit-oriented regional growth planning, coordinating with Metro Vancouver and the Metro 2050. And then we describe in a bit more detail the aspirations for the frequent fixed route bus network as being really the backbone of the system. And one commitment that the strategy does make is to provide really frequent local bus service to every area within the urban containment boundary. So that's actually a fairly, it's kind of hidden in the document, but it's a fairly significant commitment in expanding the frequency of local bus service. We then also talk about the fast and reliable transit network. And when I finish this slide, I'll turn to Jeff to describe that in a bit more detail, but that's a foundational piece of the document, the rapid transit network, the express connections, as well as interregional connections, where we talk about the importance of connecting to Squamish-Lillooet and Fraser Valley. The third strategy, where driving is the best travel choice, make it convenient and accessible, has some actions around parking, dynamic curbside management. This is where we'll also be presenting a road network map, and discussions around promoting shared vehicles like car sharing, ride hailing, making sure that those are widely available everywhere within the urban part of the region. The last one is around providing lots of different choices conveniently in one place. And this is both the physical co-locating of modes and services at transit hubs and exchanges, so you can have e-bikes or scooters, taxi, ride hail easily available, but also digital convenience. So the idea of mobility as a service that you can plan, book, pay for any of your modes on one app. So that's something we've been aspiring to for some time, working closely with BC Transit and our local mobility service providers to make that happen. The next slide, I'll turn it to Jeff to describe, actually this should be hidden. Sorry, you can skip a few slides to the map. There we are, to describe both the cycling network map and then the transit maps.
So thank you, Andrew. One of the key elements of this is obviously active transport. And now we talked about technology and the decarbonization, electrification of the fleet, whether it be scooters, bikes, mobility devices, cars, buses. The backbone of cycling and micromobility network, regional network, is this regional cycling network. And it's targeted to be 850 kilometers of protected, safe pathways and lanes, et cetera, that would become the backbone to the regional system and connect with local bike networks, as well as Metro Vancouver's a network that works through parks and other areas. So it becomes incredibly extensive. Some of this exists today, but probably only on the order of about 100 kilometers or less. So we have a very significant increase in order to be able to do this. With the electrification of bicycles that is happening so quickly, it becomes a much more viable, reliable, and attractive way of moving around for many trips in the region. So this is a very significant move in this and strategy, and actually catalyzes a lot of what we've been seeing during the pandemic with increased active modes across Metro Vancouver. The next slide, please. And maybe we can move to the next map. We're going to go into a couple of maps. So one of the key things about the strategy is focusing not just on speed, but on reliability, which means that transit would be separated either vertically or horizontally from general purpose traffic in order to get that reliability. We've been increasingly doing so with our bus service, not just our SkyTrain, but this strategy is a departure from what we've seen in the past, where we've identified 300 kilometers of new major transit network that could be bus rapid transit, light rail, or SkyTrain. But the vast majority of that, those lines that don't have little footnotes on them, the pink lines, would be surface-based. So those would be probably BRT or bus rapid transit or light rail transit, so operating at the surface, but separated from traffic. And the benefits of that is we can do a lot more of it at a more gentle scale, a gentle density scale across the region, and a lot quicker for the same amount of money. And so it was recognized by our policymakers in the province that relying solely on SkyTrain like we have in the past, while it's great, fast, and attractive, is quite intensive and expensive and not necessarily suited for all of the areas that need that reliable service. So that's a very major move here. You'll also see other lines they're going, and we'll go up to this in the next slide, but there are express services within Metro Vancouver, say to the Tsawwassen ferries, to White Rock, that may have very limited stops. Will look and feel like rapid transit for the most, in most aspects, but will probably be bus-based. We're also looking at extensions out into the Fraser Valley. You see 3 Desire lines. One of them is already the West Coast Express, and then one on Highway 1 and one the extension of Fraser Valley. Maybe we could go to the next slide, actually, that has, there we go, a blow up. So we've looked at the whole commuter shed district, if you will, and maybe even beyond. So within TransLink's legislation, there could be in the future the opportunity to look all the way to Pemberton and out to Hope. For this particular exercise, we're kind of agnostic to where people live and in regards to the travel patterns. We just want to see what the impacts are on the roads, the transit services, et cetera. So we've modeled, using our transportation model, this whole area. We've identified, not surprisingly, the Sea to Sky corridor as one that, looking at the differences in travel times between vehicles and public transit options, which are incredibly limited, we recognize right now in that corridor, and then out to the Fraser Valley, that these are ones that are going to need both increased service levels as well as separation in order to be competitive with vehicles and really attract people to switch modes and to be able to accommodate the growth. So these are what we're suggesting would be basically probably 4 lines when you look at the 3 out into the Fraser Valley that would need enhancements, the one up to the Sea to Sky corridor, and then we've also identified or accommodated the planning for high-speed rail down the Cascadia corridor and how that may work together. So what exactly that mode looks like, we're not sure, but that would be the subject of future studies going forward. One of the other things that this does, the strategy identifies the need to provide better access throughout the Lower Mainland to parks and recreation and beaches. That's one of the key qualities that people live here for. It's one of our economic drivers, and having equitable access to that is very important. We know that especially your municipalities suffer congestion related to that. So finding ways to provide alternative access for everyone, regardless of your income level or where you live, is an important theme that our policymakers have identified. Next slide, please. Andrew, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And you can actually skip ahead. Some of this more detail we've included, we'll consider that as briefing, but just in the presentation, I'll just go one more slide to reliable choices, and the next slide. So the second goal is we all have reliable choices that get us where we need to go on time, and the target being we're spending 20% less time stuck in congestion compared to today. It's worth noting that this is really a very ambitious target. Within the region of Metro Vancouver alone, we're expecting 1 million more people over the next 30 years, in addition to growth in the Fraser Valley and in your region. And to see congestion, holding the line at today's levels would be ambitious. This is even more ambitious. The next slide talks about the kinds of actions that we're proposing to get us there. The first is around making transit more reliable. So focusing on transit priority measures in particular, as Jeff was just describing, the major transit network, but also local bus services running on surface streets, having bus lanes, queue jumpers, and signal priority wherever possible, so that at least there's a robust network of congestion-free transit options. The second strategy is about making goods movement more reliable. This is focusing around industrial land protection, as well as some measures we can take to help consolidate loads. The third, making driving and parking more reliable. There's actually quite a lot in this section. If you're interested in especially our thinking around the future of electric and automated vehicles and how we might need to manage those more dynamically and using more digital tools and including an urban data trust is what one of the big proposals here, that the public sector would have a platform to communicate with these new digital services and be able to push out the rules of the road, parking restrictions, whatnot, and communicate back with those new mobility services. The fourth strategy is maintaining transportation infrastructure in a state of good repair, and that's good bread and butter kind of work. The next section is on, and actually if you could skip ahead just a few slides, I think to section 3. So affordable, the goal is none of us need to spend more than 45% of our household income on housing and transport combined, with a headline target that by 2050, nobody needs to spend more than 45% of, oh, sorry, that's a repeat. The goal essentially is that we should all be able to easily move and live in the region, irrespective of our wealth or income, and that we don't need to spend more than 45% of household incomes on housing and transport, those two linked costs. So the next slide describes the 4 key strategies here. The first one, making living close to frequent transit more affordable. This is really about ensuring that we're building more affordable, transit-oriented affordable housing, as well as protecting the existing supply of affordable, especially rental housing near frequent transit, including measures to cool speculation as we start talking about future transit expansion plans. The next one, as a priority, investing in those cost-effective and affordable modes, so especially walking, cycling, and transit, prioritizing them to neighborhoods with higher proportions of lower income folks. The third strategy is about making sure that fees and taxes are affordable and especially linked more closely to people's ability to pay. So most of the transportation revenue tools that we have in the region today aren't really progressive or linked to income. This is at least establishing a principle that we should, to the extent possible, be moving more in that direction. There's one particular action I want to highlight that talks about universal basic mobility, and that to the extent possible, made more viable by technology in the future, that people could, with a Compass card, pay for any mode or service and have that fee that they're paying be more linked to their income. So different tiers of rates. And then the fourth one is really reiterating a lot of the content earlier in the document, but focusing on the need to connect people to jobs and businesses connecting to markets. So it's the economic development piece. We also have some actions here about a thriving transportation workforce and preparing that workforce for a future of automation and more digital transportation future. So managing that transition in a thoughtful way. The fourth goal, you can skip ahead the details. You can read at your leisure. Safe and comfortable choices. We all have safe and comfortable choices make us healthier and happier. And the headline target is to reduce serious traffic injuries and fatalities by at least 5% annually until we've reached zero by or before 2050. So this is the first time actually at a regional level that we in Metro Vancouver have adopted a Vision Zero target. A number of municipalities within the region have already adopted a Vision Zero target, but this is our first attempt. The next slide talks about the 4 key areas that fall under this broader goal of safe and comfortable. And the first one is really about eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries, primarily by reducing road speeds, traffic speeds, suggesting that the default speed limit should be 40 kilometers an hour or slower on urban streets within the urban area, and that anything 60 kilometers or higher should be reserved for controlled highway environment, separated access highway environments. There's quite a bit more detail in that section around local street redesign and thinking about slower streets, more pedestrian-oriented streets, and separating modes so there's space for walking, space for cycling, space for transit, space for driving. The next one, ensuring everyone feels welcome, comfortable, and physically secure, has a lot of actions around both public art and customer amenities, as well as security measures and anti-harassment kind of inclusion type measures to make everyone feel comfortable getting around by any mode. The third strategy is about reducing air pollution impacts, noise pollution, vibrations, all of those other negative externalities from transport. And the fourth is around preparing for disruptions and disasters. So a lot of our emergency management related actions and resilience actions fall in there. And then I'll finish up just with the last strategy, or the last goal 5. If you can skip ahead a couple slides. Carbon-free choices. So the goal is we've got many transportation choices that are carbon-free, supporting local and global efforts to tackle climate change. By 2030, the target we've actually established here is that carbon pollution from light-duty vehicles will be reduced by 65% over 2010 levels, and eliminating pollution from transportation altogether by 2050. The target for the region that Metro Vancouver has adopted in Climate 2050 is 45% over 2010 levels by 2030. The recognition is that light duty vehicles of all of the sectors have the highest sort of capital turnover, and probably the easiest, easier than buildings or manufacturing to achieve that kind of level of carbon reduction. And so we've established this more ambitious target that will be very difficult to achieve, but our Mayor's Council and Board are keen to work with Metro and the province to map out over the coming year a more concrete action plan to get there. But at least laying the groundwork. In the next slide, the key areas that we acknowledge we need to focus on are, first, to reduce the energy requirements of the transport system by focusing on less energy intensive modes, especially walking, cycling, and transit. Then all of our motorized trips remaining, both passenger light duty vehicles as well as heavy commercial and transit vehicles, transitioning those to zero emission. Primarily our strategy at TransLink and the low carbon fleet strategy is to move to battery electric buses. Then the third is around supporting ready access to low carbon fuels, but especially a supply of electricity powered by clean renewables. And the fourth is making sure that we're also accounting for upstream and downstream emissions impacts when we're making procurement decisions, construction decisions in terms of the concrete, as well as disposal of our assets. So there's more detail under all of these, but I think we'll stop there, and Jeff and I can take any questions on any of that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your presentation. Of course, just because I have the opportunity, I do have to mention that there is a rail line between North Vancouver and Lillooet and beyond. And having said that, I'll open the floor to questions and comments from our directors. Chris, Director Pettingill, and Director Elliott.
Thanks. Some great stuff in the plan. A couple things I was curious about. Do you see BC Transit, TransLink, getting involved in owning a fleet of shared autonomous passenger vehicles, or just more facilitating private operators in the space?
Yeah, I think we talk about both in the document. There's a big emphasis on preparing the region for those private or personally owned automated vehicles that are actually on the way already. We're kind of, to the extent that we're not being proactive enough, the technology is kind of sneaking in, and our concern that we flag in the document is that public sector won't be ready to adequately regulate and manage those services. So we put quite a bit of emphasis on that area, but we do have some discussion as well about transitioning the transit fleet. Ultimately, that's still a medium to longer term conversation. Lots of discussion required with labor and industry partners, but transitioning the transit fleet also to automated in the future.
Okay, thanks. And somewhat related to that, and I think I saw a little bit of a hint in your opening graphic, but as the technology progresses and seeing where things are and what people are testing right now, have you put your minds very much to flying autonomous vehicles or flying vehicles for people or goods?
Yeah, we have. There's an action. It's actually under the transit section. So under 1.2, making transit the most convenient choice for longer trips. We have some discussion about urban aerial mobility. And the main thing that we say is that that technology is actually developing fairly rapidly, and that's something else that we want to pay attention to. But that the region has a number of public objectives that we want to make sure are well accounted for before we welcome any services like that into the region, and that's primarily noise, emissions, energy use, carbon pollution, as well as accessibility to all people, that it's not unaffordable, like just a luxury service, that to the extent you're taking up more of the urban airspace with something that only a small number of people can enjoy, we would want to have conversations about that as well. So we flag all those issues, but then say that we should be thinking about those as we're designing future multimodal facilities.
Director Elliott and then Director Rainbow.
Thanks for the presentation. And I just have a couple of questions. Does the plan contemplate future governance? And the reason I ask is because you have very small centers within the TransLink system. You're now talking about expanding, links regionally, and it's very difficult for smaller communities to get the attention they need within that mayor's council structure. They need a project that's a couple $100,000, and often TransLink is talking about billions of dollars. And so I just wonder if governance is contemplated within the 2050 plan.
It's a good question, Director Elliott. Yes, to a certain degree. Now, what we've identified, both you pointed to one about geography. So looking as the regions start to meld together more and more, and as far as both economic integration and travel integration, are the governance structures set up? It's not prescriptive, but we just recognize that they may need to be revisited in that regard. There's also things like Andrew spoke quite a bit about automated vehicles. So do we have the governance structures in place to be able to accept and manage those? Our assessment is not right now, so we'd have to look at that. Then there's even sort of digital and privacy type things around information if we're going to go towards mobility as a service and the ability to book and plan and pay for different trips and have mobility accounts, regardless whether it's transit or shared vehicles or automated. The support for that doesn't yet exist either. So there's three probably different levels of governance that we've recognized need to be assessed coming out of this. The funding and the governance over decisions is another one. We're a bit agnostic too as far as who delivers things. Like we pointed to the interregional services, and we've worked very closely with BC Transit and with Fraser Valley Regional District on these, but we're not prescribing who would actually either deliver or operate those. Those would be for future decisions. It's more just that we know we need these things.
Right. The funding goes hand in hand. I think that's one thing the pandemic's pointed out to us, is that our funding models were really vulnerable when people aren't on the bus or parking. So anyway, I won't ask a question about that, but I imagine that's contemplated in the same way going forward.
It is, and this is not a funded strategy, but our next step is actually we're developing an update to the mayor's vision, the 10-year vision that's been very successful at guiding expansion, multimodal expansion in the region. And that will be a costed plan that we then need to figure out, how do we take these things on and which ones come to the forefront over the next 10 years or so, in discussion with the province and with SLRD and Fraser Valley Regional District about, what are those things we need to start planning for and actually putting in our capital programs.
Some of the statements around cars, I was curious about, because on one hand we say, let's make parking convenient for people, but really we want them on transit or another mode of transportation. So is there a specific goal around seeing a reduced car ownership per capita in the plan? And then maybe you could speak to a little bit about that tension around making driving easier and making parking easier, and actually sometimes keeping it a little tougher forces people onto the transit system because it's a easier, more convenient ride. So how do you make those two things come together in this plan?
Thank you for that question. And I'll start and maybe Andrew can go in because it is actually one of the big moves in this plan. And when we went out in phase 2 and talked about the fast and reliable network, which is the majority of which is surface-based, as well as other transit services, we're talking about reprioritizing street space, limited street space, both to transit and to cycle, walk, and micro mobility. And by the nature of that, we're talking about moving people as opposed to private vehicles. So that's one of the things is going to be to make those modes more attractive. And by extension, driving becomes a little bit less attractive. Now, what we want to do, though, is make sure that it's reliable for those that do need to travel by a vehicle. That's what we're speaking about, less about convenience, about that being the most convenient choice for everybody. But if you are going to do that, that we have ways of managing congestion, about using intelligent transportation systems to both assist with wayfinding, with traffic management, with parking management. So we know that people trolling for parking spots, et cetera, causes a lot of congestion, slows down our buses, all of those things. So that's part of where the efficiency mode comes in, less about making it more cost effective or attractive to take a vehicle. Andrew, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important point, and it's something I think we're hearing quite a lot about in the current phase 3 engagement that we're in right now. A lot of people share that same concern that you just expressed, that maybe we didn't get the balance just right. What we are trying to do is do exactly what Jeff just described, but also make it clear that a significant portion of the population will still need to rely on cars and trucks, for trips that really aren't viable to be made by other modes, or for commercial, conducting business or work. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a place in the strategy to reflect that there will still be a robust and reliable road network, and that parking when you need to park will be reliable and available. And so I think we are trying to focus more on the reliability part. And I think, we could nuance some of the language probably around making driving convenient. But it is about the other key thing under convenience for driving is making it convenient to make the occasional car trip without needing to own a car. So Director Elliott, to your first point about auto ownership, it's not one of our headline targets, but it is a KPI that we propose to monitor, and that reducing auto ownership and encouraging people to use shared cars, car sharing, taxis, or ride hailing as much as possible. We see that as a big part of the future of driving.
Especially, I'll add, especially if we move towards automation, which is in most of our scenarios, we see that penetration within the next 30 years, that we want to make sure that governments incentivize the use of shared mobility as opposed to privately owned automated vehicles that could just make more and more congestion.
Okay, one more question and then maybe just a comment. Your document has 3.1.2, which is about getting affordable housing around those transit corridors, but it talks about supporting local First Nations efforts to cool land speculation along major transit corridors. Do you have a concept of what that looks like, or are you getting feedback about how to do that? I always thought that was more of a provincial, federal kind of responsibility.
So this document is not written. We're TransLink, we're here. It's our role to convene this and pull it together, but it's actually a collective voice for all of the agencies within the region, what it will take to get to the objectives, including there's a responsibilities table at the end of the actual document that points to, I think, your question there, or I think observation that this is well beyond the means of TransLink. This is more of a provincial, municipal, federal type role. And we've designated those accordingly in the tables that follow to look at what those mechanisms would be. There are some local mechanisms we've seen, even the city of Vancouver, preemptively put in development cost charge expectations around the Broadway subway to try and cool things down early on, but that was probably even too late. So there are a number of things that we'll need to look at.
Okay, and also I think one of the most challenging things for working parents when their children are between the ages of 5 and 12 is the after school time, getting them to their activities. And it would be interesting to see in this plan, if I didn't see it, but I might have missed it, a strategy for collaborating with school districts to get children to where they need to go so that parents aren't doing that work. So it's sort of like managed transportation for children until they're old enough to navigate that on their own. But that 7-year stretch is really challenging and forces me to take my car to work. Thanks. Thanks,
Yeah.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Elliott. Director Rainbow, you have the floor.
Thank you. Actually, Director Elliott covered a couple of things I was interested in. But I looked at the map there where we have a pink line going all the way up to Pemberton. We are really actively working right now to try to get a transit system that goes from just north of Pemberton right down through into Vancouver. So I'm just wondering, what should our relationship be with you? You know, we're working with BC Transit at the moment, but you're talking about bringing that line north of your current boundary, which is Lions Bay. So I'd hate for us to do a whole pile of work while you were doing some parallel work without talking to us, and then all of a sudden you announce there's going to be a bus all the way up to Pemberton. So how do we work together on that? What do you suggest?
Thank you, Director Rainbow, for that question. Yes. So as I was trying to say, this is a collective strategy for the region that all agencies would be involved in, whether it be the province and their role in helping with doing planning with BC Transit and being the conduit for the major highway system and then interregional connections. So it shows up within the minister's mandate. So this is a collective vision. As I said earlier, tried to indicate, it's not saying who would actually deliver it. So we've already started those conversations with BC Transit, with the province, kind of looking at our modeling and understanding what we think the long-term demands would be and what the benefits of reliable and separated, faster, publicly available service would do in supporting your regional growth strategy, your municipal OCPs, and ours as well. It doesn't yet prescribe when we should start looking at that from a more intensive investment. I know that you're very engaged with BC Transit and MOTI on those services, the first models of that. We have been in discussion, so I can assure you that we've been at the table with those agencies looking at how it would integrate into Metro Vancouver, where there might be overlaps with our existing service as far as Lions Bay, and then starting to look for opportunities. Those are sort of near-term issues as we start to look at the longer term. So no concerns there that one hand won't be talking to the other in this regard.
This line is really pointing to that process to some extent. There's not a separate TransLink process or efforts underway.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick question. Have you considered high-speed water transport at all?
We did do some work early. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
We have looked at marine-borne transport. We looked at a number of potential corridors and connections within that. There are limited, as we see it right now, with our current growth strategies, there are limited opportunities for more passenger, at least within Metro Vancouver ferry, that would be more competitive and more reliable than the lines that we've shown here that would be road or surface based. You need a very high, what we've found over the years, we've looked at it many times, you need a very high density with origins and destinations on either side, where you don't need to be transferring a lot from other modes to be able to make that work. The Lonsdale Quay to downtown Vancouver is one of those examples. The cities like in Australia and otherwise that have very extensive ones tend to have that clustering around the waterfront of those multiple uses. We have fewer of those here. That's not to say we have identified there may be more passenger services, especially outside the region, working with BC Ferries and others.
I think just building on what Jeff was saying, that analysis we were doing is really especially looking at our fast and reliable network, like a C-bus quality kind of caliber of service. And we found that per Jeff's point, there aren't that many other opportunities that would need that level of service, but potentially some smaller passenger fare, like within New Westminster, the Queen's Quay to Queensborough, a short little hop across the water, and there's a fairly small boat that right now is running some limited service. Those sorts of opportunities we suggest we should explore further, but larger scale, the road-based transport is faster than and marine transport just goes slower per kilometers. And then the destinations, if they're not at the water's edge, add in the hassle of a transfer.
Okay, thank you.
I see Director Pettingill, but Director Forsyth, did you indicate you had a question? Okay, no, go ahead then, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of Director Elliott's comments and the responses. It seems to me we have a lot of car first businesses and business models, which maybe aren't so compatible with human health and wellness and the climate crisis and so on. So I think it might be important to focus a bit more on what we can do to help those business models transition rather than making sure we protect them. I think for me, allowing those to continue is a lower priority. So just a comment there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for hands from the directors. Not seeing any. So I will, Director Rainbow. Yep.
Just a comment about transit and using transit, choosing to use it. There's unfortunately in Metro a sort of a negative connotation with transport. People don't ride buses. Good heavens, I don't ride buses. You even have that horrible name of loser cruiser that's attached to bus transportation. So, and it's really difficult, I think, to legislate that people have to start using transit. And the key is to make it the best choice. And I think of an example from England, which is where you might guess I come from. My brother is out in the country. He used to drive all the way into London. He doesn't anymore. Why not? Two reasons. One, because they put a cost on driving into the center of London, and they put the parking prices in London really high. And the second one is because they started building low-cost car parks at the ends of railway lines, the terminals. So he now drives 10 minutes and parks all day and jumps on the train to go in. He wasn't told that he had to do that. Because of the decisions that were made, it became the sensible thing for him to do. My sister lives outside of London as well. She happens to have a bus that comes past her house at 15-minute intervals. They don't get their car out if they're going into London. They get on the bus, they go to the train, they get the train into town. So again, she wasn't told that she had to do that. There wasn't any legislation compelling her to do that. It just became convenient. And I think that's the key thing that we have to keep in mind. And I'm sure you do. I'm probably preaching to the converted here. So I apologize. I'll shut up. Thank you very much.
I just will say in response to Director Rainbow, I think that is hopefully the theme, and maybe we'll need to look at it and make sure that it's popping out. The point is not to force people to take transit. And I will say, though, that prior to the pandemic, I think our stats were on general 70% of the population in Metro Vancouver used transit, within any 6-month period. So while some people may view some of the modes that way, that's generally not the prevailing, and we have a really good building base to go from. But I think where we've seen customers been really satisfied is the points you made about where it's just more attractive more reliable, faster, dedicated, comfortable, etc. And so that's the theme that we're trying to promote here with this one, that people come because it's the best choice, both from a cost perspective and from an experiential perspective. And we've been doing that incrementally, both building out a rapid transit system, and now our rapid bus system across Metro Vancouver really attracts people that way. So thank you for the comments.
Thank you. This is great work. I absolutely love public transit, and I miss the service from Pemberton down to the city. And I love jumping on the buses in Vancouver, and I look forward to these improvements. This is really great work. I think we can, I did have one question, if I can. On the penultimate page of your presentation, there's this neat little unit. It's called the starship-pit.com. I have an electric vehicle. Is that a mobile electric charging unit?
That actually is, yeah, if you're interested, if you're able to put the slide deck back on, it's on slide 51. I think that just a little image, it's actually a delivery robot. And so that would be sort of a first last mile. There might be a FedEx, truck somewhere, or an Amazon truck, and it's delivering parcels or takeout meals automated on the sidewalk to the final destination. Interesting, there's a lot of issues with respect to accessibility. Where should those things be allowed on the sidewalks, or do they need to travel in dedicated bike lanes or on the street? But they are already operating in cities around the world.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Jeff Cross and Andrew McCurran, for your presentation. Yes.
Thank you. I was just going to say, we would be remiss if we didn't also encourage folks, if you're able to share with your networks, directing people to transport2050.ca. This is the final week of public engagement, and so we are really encouraging folks to fill out the survey. Take a look at the document. We've got a summary version that's shorter, or the full length version. And if you're able to encourage your constituents, we welcome residents from SLRD, feedback on the strategy as well. That would be appreciated.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now. All right. Yes, Director Elliott.
Yesterday was a long day. Was there feedback on our agenda from yesterday about this topic?
Yes. And we moved it to, there wasn't specifically on TransLink, but there were definitely some comments for the Metro 2050 Regional Growth Strategy.
But we'll go back to that, correct? When we
go
back into, okay, thank you.
It's bumped to item 16, along with the presentation by Mandy Russo, our NDIT intern. That was also bumped. So we'll hear that at the end of the day. Right now, we're on item 5, staff reports and other business. I'm looking to CAO Helmer or Kristen Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have nothing under the CAO verbal today.
Okie doke. So the next item is PILT. Mr. Franz is coming, but I think we should have a little break before we go to the PILT discussion. I'm getting a big thumbs up. Okay, this is beautiful. Break until 11 o'clock.
Good.
How's that, Director Rainbow?
Vivian, just so you know, I have a call. I might be a few minutes late coming back.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We'll recess to 11 and then get ready to go on Mural for the PILT section.
Great presentation, Barb.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. My watch says after 11. Are people signing into Mural? I see a visiting elephant. Okay. I don't know where I am. I did sign in. Oh, God. You know, I may not be using this properly. Oh, dear. Welcome back, everyone. I'm looking at the Mural screen and I'm seeing CAO Helmer and Philippa. Philippa, do you see me there?
There are, Chair, there are a couple of icons who don't have names. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there should be just a little icon that should tell you what animal you are if you're in the board. So right down at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to suggest that you are either the panda or the ladybug.
Chair, can we do a quick roll call to ensure that Director Richmond, Director Forsyth, and Director Compton are back with us?
I know that Director Richmond was planning to be late. Crompton, are you here? And Director Forsyth? Okay, hello.
Thank you.
We have quorum. I don't believe we have Director Crompton or Richmond back.
Thanks, Chair.
But we could proceed with setting up for Mural, and I'm hoping that will sort of lead us.
Sorry,
through.
no, I am here.
Oh, hello. That's good to know.
I'm the visiting squid.
Squid. I see a sheep, an elephant.
What did I miss? What agenda item are we on?
This is what happens when you're late getting back, Director. We were sent an email with a link for Mural. And if you go into that, we are going to do the PILT exercise using Mural, and CAO Helmer is going to help us with that. I hope.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And if it would be helpful, if anybody's having difficulty locating that Mural link, Pip can give them a private message of the link so that they would be able to click on that and get in. So if anybody needs that, if you could please just raise your hand and we'll arrange to have that forwarded to you.
Okay.
I'm seeing Director Weed, Director Mack. Anyone else? Just one moment. I'm just waiting for my Zoom settings to be updated and then I'll be able to send that link to you.
And Chair, is it all right to admit Director LaFrance at this time, since this is her report that we're going through here? Are we ready?
We are, and we so welcome Suzanne LaFrance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Suzanne LaFrance, and thank you for your report and being here today. We're just setting up to do the exercise on Mural, but would you like to go over the report?
Sure, yes.
Thanks.
So we're here to discuss the BC Hydro PILT payments in lieu of taxes policy, which is the current policy of the board. The BC Hydro PILT are basically in respect of all of the BC Hydro generating facilities in the SLRD. And so we receive these payments in lieu of taxes for these generating facilities. So the province has listed some preferences on how they see or their assistance on allocating these funds. They have multiple options. Basically, the options are allocating all of the funds to general administration, allocating all of the funds to another regional service, or multiple regional services. And this is due to the fact that all of the taxpayers do pay into general government and the regional services, so it hits everybody. And then the other options the province outlines are basically trying to pinpoint the actual impact areas. So providing funding to just those areas where the generating infrastructure is located. So that would be for us, for SLRD area A and B, and then we also have area D. And so it's currently the policy kind of balances all of these kind of different outlooks. And I think that it is a good way to go about doing these allocations, but of course that can be also changed and addressed and reviewed as well. So there's a lot of different, I don't know a better word, but competing interests for these allocations. And so it's a balancing act that has to be reviewed pretty delicately because any changes can impact taxation levels in a different service. So anything that is requested of the board to adjust, I recommend that I come back with any kind of tax impact so that, you know, this, I don't anticipate this meeting having everything in writing and finished. I anticipate having to come back and showing the tax impact and the changes that are requested. So one thing with the current PILT policy is there's a cap. So currently all of the incremental increases, that means the year-over-year increases to the BC Hydro PILT amounts we receive, most of it goes right to the Northern and Southern PILT reserve. So they always get an increase each year. And the other services have been stagnant, unless there is an over 4% increase in 1 year, and then that over 4% increase goes to the general government portion, which it's been up and down, and lately the increases per year have been around 4% or higher. This year it was 4.99%. So all of that 4% went into the Northern and Southern PILT reserve as per the policy allocation, and then that 0.99% went to general government as an increase. So potentially what may work for everybody, potentially, is we look at that threshold and maybe start that change now so that each funding pocket will now get an incremental increase based on the actual annual increase and not have all the incremental increase going just to the northern and southern Pilt reserves, because those are about 200,000 each now. Let me just double check that figure before I say something wrong. So, oh, sorry, I'm wrong. So the current Area A northern Pilt amount is 123,890. And that's also the same Area P northern Pilt amount, 123,890. And there's also the District of Lillooet Pilt amount of 61,945. And but that doesn't, that does increase as well. And the Area D in District of Squamish Pilt amount currently is 91,296. So potentially we keep those same pockets, and instead of applying just the increases to those Pilt reserves, we apply the increases to all of those pockets annually. So everybody gets an incremental increase each year. That's an option as well. It's an easy button option, but it doesn't address specific changes to the structure currently. So potentially we can start with what the board is happy with the current funding pockets and what the board is not happy with. And so I listed in that report, let me just get the actual page that I have here. Bear with me, sorry. Ooh. So the current funding pockets are on page, oh boy, there's no pages on this. So
Yes, Sarah. At the top right-hand corner.
it's within the report, and it starts Board Policy 2.2, BC Hydro Pilt information. The current allocations using the 2021 Pilt funding received and the corresponding percentages of total Pilt are as follows. And the next page is where the current funding pockets are listed. So I separated them by regional and then local areas, and then the total amount for 2021. Does everybody see that portion of the report?
Just to interrupt you, Suzanne, we're on page 6 of 29 of your report, I believe.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
6. So these are the current pockets and the 2021 amounts. So is there any comments on the current funding pocket?
Director Elliott?
Can you just remind me or someone who was on the previous board why we preferentially are putting the increases to the northern and southern Pilt allocations? It was something to do with bringing them up to a higher level, but why?
So because they're the impact areas. So these are the areas that are impacted by the generating infrastructure. And we don't have services per se in a lot of these specific areas where the generating facilities are located, but they are within Area A and B, with also that Check-in-Miss one in Area D. So that was the purpose, was to try to allocate more funding to the impacted area, which I agree with. Yeah, but
then, Ms. LaFrance, does the increase just go into those Pilt funds, or does it also go into like the Lillooet Rec Center or the Seton Shalaf Fire Protection or the Squamish Public Library? Because that's one thing that Tony and I, Director Rainbow and I have struggled with, is that the public library funds stagnated and they weren't growing with population.
Yeah.
So the increase just goes to the Pilt?
So yes, the increase just goes to the Northern Pilt location other than Lillooet Rec Center and Seton. So those first three reserves, the Area A Northern Pilt, the Area B Northern Pilt, and the District of Lillooet Northern Pilt, those have been allocated the increases, as well as the Area D and D District of Squamish Pilt, not the Squamish Public Library. I separated them because they are a part of that impacted local area. That's why I added them to that group. But they do not receive, you're right, they are stagnant from, I think, 2014 potentially, which is something that adjusting the allocations, adjusting the incremental increases would address.
Director Rainbow?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the library, the fact that it has been frozen since about 2014. And we recently had a resolution to allocate $35,000 to the library from the Area D and District of Squamish-Pilt, that 91,000 that you see there, to bring the library allocation up closer to 50,000. And then we also approved the same amount for next year. So one of the things that I thought we could look at when we're reviewing this, one of the changes we could look at is taking some of the money on a regular basis from that Area D and District of Squamish-Pilt and switching it into the public library so that the amount would be around 50. And then the increases each year be applied to both of those accounts, to the Area D DOS part and to the library part. So that's one of the suggestions that I wanted to make. And I think Director Elliott is on board with that.
Yeah, so with my first suggestion on changing where those incremental increases are posted to, allocated to, if we just have all of those funding pockets increase now incrementally, we might not reach 50,000 next year, that's for sure, but we will have that increase available. And I agree that District Squamish and Area D Pilt Reserve can be used for the library as well, yeah.
Director.
Can I just follow up on that? Suzanne, can we then, or how do we say, instead of all of the Southern Pilt allocation, or most of it going into Area D DOS, that we change the amounts there and we increase the library one to by $35,000 a year? How do we do that? You're muted.
Sorry about that. So would have to be a change in the policy. And I caution you in the fact that that current District Squamish and Area D Pilt Reserve is open for any Area D and District Squamish initiative. And potentially limiting it just to the library could be at not a negative for you in a potentially in a different year where things change.
It's not the whole amount though, is it? How much goes into that each year?
So far, the Area D and District Squamish Pilt Reserve received 91,296
each year.
That is for any initiative that you would like to use, including the library.
Yeah. So if we adjusted it, you'd get down, we'd have 55,000 in the Area D District of Squamish-Pilt and 50,000 in the library, if we wanted to adjust it. And then that gives the library some certainty. It gives them that they know what their budget is going to be from year to year, rather than having to come and ask for a grant every year.
Yes, that is definitely an option.
Okay, Thank you.
Director Pettingill and then Director Elliott.
Yeah, I was going to ask for some more background context. I don't know if Director Elliott wanted to follow up on this specifically or.
Go ahead, Karen, if it's to do with the library and Director Rainbow's comments.
Yeah, just want to make sure that Director Rainbow isn't speaking for both of us because we haven't talked about this.
No, I know. I'm just fair enough.
But I think what Ms. LaFrance is saying is that you apply the annual increase against both the library and the PILT so that the library starts to grow over time. And then you maintain maximum flexibility for the PILT funds because it could be 1 year the library needs more or someone else needs more. And so I think what she's saying is that you wouldn't designate a whole amount and lock it in. You could certainly create that agreement with the library, the expectation to use a portion of the PILT funds to top up that 14,000 while it grows, but leave ourselves the biggest amount of flexibility by not necessarily designating any other portion of the PILT. That's what I heard, and I think that's a better approach is to leave the flexibility so that you can certainly allot some of it to the library each year to top up that amount while it grows, but then if something changes or you have the ability to make a different decision. So I certainly am more supportive of that approach. Thanks, Chair.
Yes.
Okay. Your library.
Director Chris?
Thanks. And I think I got the answer to the first part. I just want to confirm in terms of the rationale for these funds, it's very much tied to the immediate impacts of generation. So it's not transmission lines and substations, it's generation only. Okay, thank you. And then the other piece, because it refers to Cheakamus, and then I saw in the report that actually includes Daisy Lake and so on. Is there other generation that's included in that Cheakamus sort of label beyond Daisy Lake, or is that really what we're talking about?
Unfortunately, I don't have that information. I don't know where the generating facilities are. I've never seen them. I just know that there's the 3 in the rural area, which includes the Cheakamus. I don't know anything about the actual infrastructure. I'm sorry.
Director Elliott, would you like to comment on the Cheakamus?
Councilor Pettingill, the generating stations in the valley, right? Comes down the big pipes from Daisy Lake into Area D.
Well, yeah, and that's why I was a bit confused because I thought that was an IPP. And then I saw in the report a mention of Daisy Lake as being part of Cheakamus. So I was a bit confused about what infrastructure exactly we're talking about here.
Yeah, Daisy Lake holds the water back, comes down the pipes, drains into the Cheakamus generating station. Cheakamus is used as a peak power supply for the Lower Mainland, so they can turn it on and off.
And in the north, we have the massive system that the hydro people were talking about yesterday, Sabrina and so forth, that the 2 dam, well, more than 2 dams. We have the Carpenter Reservoir, La Joie, and then the changes at Seton. We have a massive footprint here in areas A, B, and Lillooet. And that was why I was sort of requesting that we take some of the general government and land use planning contribution that we make combined is like 57%, and take some of that money and redirect it towards the rec center, because I wasn't happy with the amount we're allocating for the rec center. But as you can see, what I've done on a year-to-year basis is taken some of those other PILT funds and put them towards the rec center. And I can continue to do that, just like you can direct a rainbow towards the library on an annual basis. Do we want to move this discussion to the mural page? We're set up to do that. Is there?
Yes, I think.
Suzanne, would you like to keep talking about your report? Oh, Sal, sorry. Director Demare?
Yes, we definitely have a huge footprint here. We got Carpenter Reservoir, which is roughly 45 kilometers long, and the Downton Reservoir, which is another over 20 kilometers long, plus the impact on the Bridge River, because it has very little flow now. We used to get salmon right where the LaJoy Dam is right now. I've seen pictures of salmon jumping at that spot over a small falls. So we definitely have one heck of a huge impact. And Road 40 along Carpenter Reservoir, as many people have gone over into the lake and died. Yeah, and we still fighting that road. We've been fighting it for forever. Whoever the regional director is in Area A, that's number one. Number two is early FSR. That's what you have to deal with on a continual basis. So with that, you know, in the Bridge River Valley, in Area A, we only have so many services. We're not as big as other areas. Probably Area B is very similar to us with the amount of tax services that we have. And that's one reason why I wanted to get the OCP going next year, is I want to create more tax services. And help with what we need there. Parks and recreation, maybe a wildfire tax service. And the tax rates or tax requisition for them, keep them small and use the PIL fund to supplement them. So that's my take on it all. I would not like to see the current goes up to 2025. I would like to see it stay there until 2025 and then have this discussion then as far as where the yearly increases go. Because by that time, we're up to almost $200,000 in the PIL. The other issue I've got is the select funds. The select funds is actually quite small because we've got so many nonprofit organizations, and you know, I've now was able to get Marshall Lake Valley into the BRVCA, so they're a committee. So they, and also the LaJoy Lake community as a committee under the BRVCA. Those are two things I've done. We still, Goldbridge still does not have a community organization. So as these community organizations grow, I'm going to need more select funds because it's just not enough. So one of the concepts I had was that some of that PIL fund could be used for under the special projects. That's it as one of the categories, as projects that are over $10,000 that are not a tax service, such as the LaJoy Lake aeration project, which in the end is going to run around $20,000 to $30,000 just to complete that aeration project. So those are some of my comments on the PIL. Thank you.
Is it okay if I respond, Sal? So the language of the policy can definitely be adjusted. I know that Area A, the Northern Tilt, has a different language on what it can be used for than the Southern Tilt. So we can definitely change that wording as well. So if you wanted to add in special projects for not-for-profit organizations, we could do that. I could find better wording, but you know, obviously not for-profit undertaking.
That would be an improvement.
That'd be an improvement, yeah. And I think probably Vivian would maybe want that also.
Yes, please. And can I just ask a question? When you compare the northern and the southern, the way they're allocated, In the south, do you have that same percentage taken out for general government and land use planning?
It's not taking out of the PILT. Like, I don't understand the question, sorry. The allocations, as you see on that page, was it 26 of 29? Those are standard. They're not, I'm not taking funds out of one and putting it in another, if that's what. Is that what you?
Sorry, when you receive the payment in lieu of taxes funding from BC Hydro for the Checkamoose system, do you allocate 35% to general government and 21% to land use planning, as you do in the north?
It's all one lump sum payment. We don't get separate payments for each generating facility. So those allocations, as you see them, are for all of the full PILT amount.
So the southern and the northern combined, then we allocate 35 and 21% to general government and land use planning. It's not just the northern funds.
I don't think I understand your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Director Rainbow.
We actually need the previous Director Demare here because she was responsible for putting this whole plan together. And I think what preceded this was there was no split between South and North. I think if you look at that chart, the top part of it says regional, and the whole thing was regional before. And the result of that was that the northern areas weren't getting a fair share of the money, especially considering that most of the hydro installations are in the northern part. So what this scheme did was it separated. We take the regional section from the 100% that the regional district gets. The regional section, general government, land use, general select, and then the area A, B, C, and D selects. That comes off the top. And then there's the separate regional allocations. One to the northern PILT, A, B, and District of Lillooet, and the rest.
Got it.
Okay, and then.
Yeah, got it. And yeah, I can't chair and also be part of the discussion, so I'll just be quiet. And I see Sal Demare has his hand up.
Yes, the other aspect is as we get into asset management and try to build up the reserves in the various tax services that we have through the asset management program. You know, where's all this money going to come from? And you know, we've used some already from the General Select Fund that comes from PILT to do a couple last year to add. I can't remember how much it was, but probably about $20,000 in total to a couple of different tax services. But for Area A, as you've seen with the sewer project and the amount of money that's gone into it so far from PILT, which is $200,000, and I'll probably do another $50,000 this year into it. That's where it's got to come from, PILT. Other than we raise the tax rates for each service to increase the reserves on the various tax services for the asset management. So that's why for our area it's critical that we get that PILT up to that $200,000 level, because that's where some of that reserve is going to come from as we move forward.
Understand and agree. CAO Helmer, would you like to move us to the mural, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Happy to do that. Would you like me to do a screen share of that, or shall we just, do you all have the ability that you can see that screen and we can just use the two screens?
I can't see the screen and look at these numbers as well. I prefer-
Okay, I
prefer
wonder
you
if
to
I
do it.
could copy that in there. I'll see if I can do that because I have the same issue. I can't see that at the same time. So if I do this and copy it, maybe I can paste it in there. No. Do I put it in a comment? Philippa, do you know how I can take a snip and insert it in here somehow?
I can try that if you just confirm it's the table on report page 8 of 29. Is that the one you're looking for?
It's the table on page 6 of 29. So that people can look at what we're going to be putting in Mural, but still have these numbers in front of them when they're having the discussion, because any decisions that they make are going to also affect where these numbers go.
Okay, just one moment. Okay, I'll pop the table in there. It should be visible now to those on the Mural board. Can I get confirmation on that, please?
It is visible. Nice.
Yeah, just needs to be a bit bigger.
Can I make it smaller? So I get,
Pip, can you call us all to your view so that we can see the sticky notes and that, and hopefully that should get us all kind of the same size.
Yep, got it.
Eureka. Is everyone on the same page here now?
Perfect. Is there anybody who does not have access to the Mural board at this time that we can make sure you do get in? And Suzanne, I sent you the link as well so that you would be able to come in and see what people are talking about or anything that gets added. The 3 comments that have been mentioned so far are captured in here, and we can add additional comments or suggestions so that we can get all the ideas out first and then try to distill that down to something that there's a good level of support for from everyone for.
So we will add Sal's last comment on select funds, and he would like to see those increased too, if that's okay.
Yeah. So Pip, can I leave that part to you now that you can? Yeah, thank you. And so would that be select funds annually? So that would mean an allocation of a certain amount to the select funds, similar to what we do for the PILT funds, because the PILT funds are growing, but the select funds at this point are not growing the same. So they would, in Suzanne's projections, if I've got this right, Suzanne, the dollar value may increase slightly over the next 5 years, but the percent of the total will actually go down. So in terms of inflation, it will be losing value.
Yeah, the percents on this aren't stagnant because it'll change based on next year's amounts, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We never know what's going to actually get used in a year. It's just estimates.
Like for spending?
No, I mean, how much hydro is going to give us, which is based on the consumption of energy.
Yes, yes. Yeah, they have other factors involved. I believe they look at population changes too and other changes as well.
Okay, so I did see Director Rainbow had his hand up.
I just want to clarify here. If we wanted to increase the allocation to the select funds for A, B, C, and D, which are currently at 3.4%, if we wanted to increase that, then that necessarily means that we decrease something else by the same amount.
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct. Okay.
It has to balance with something else.
Yeah.
And my suggestion was general government and land use planning.
And I caution that because it's basically taxing for more select funds. So you're saying, I want to tax more so I can give away more money, which, you know, I understand the concept, but
I just want to increase the contribution to the rec center. So that's what I meant, Philippa.
So the same conversation could potentially be considered for the Lillooet Rec Center as what was discussed by Area D earlier. Is there a desire to increase that number, and does it apply to all of the northern areas? And is it a one-time adjustment, or is it a higher, do we want that to receive a percentage increase annually as well, incrementally each year? Or what does that increase look like, and how would you like it to be captured?
Can I ask a question that's relevant to that? We've got the Seton Shallow fire protection. With the new agreement that, or what Sarah Morgan is working on with them, would that still need to be there, or it would? Yeah, okay.
Yes, I don't believe we're charging them a rental amount, so this is still needed for this.
And if I understand it correctly, that contribution is going over to Shalath Fire Services to provide the same service to the residents. Is that right?
Yes, there's an agreement with Shalath.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few ideas thrown out there. Are there any other ideas that we want to capture before we kind of evaluate the ideas that are out there?
Sorry. Can I go ahead, Melanie?
Please go ahead, yes.
Just that I have a new service in, well, we do in areas A, B, and Lillooet, which is the wilderness search and rescue. They've been happening for about a year, and I've spoken to Suzanne about this, but they could potentially be funded under a separate contract, but the same service as the road search and rescue that we currently have, if I understand that. So that's an addition to our consideration under PELT.
So yeah, to clarify that, this I just talked to Vivian last week about this, and it's not in the work plan as far as I know, but it's a potential new contract for adding on to our Lillooet area A and B rescue service for wilderness rescue. We do have the area D search and rescue services where we have multiple contracts under the one service. And so this would be similar to that. So under the area D search and rescue, we pay a little bit to the Howe Sound and the Howe Sound Marine and the Whistler search and rescue.
But that's nothing to do with PILT, is it, Suzanne? That's a cost center, and occasionally I've allocated some extra money from my select funds, but that's on a request basis, you know.
Right. So I think Vivian was just mentioning she could use the PILT reserve to fund that as well too. So the Northern PILT reserve could supplement that service as well.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm throwing some apples and oranges in. Yeah, Director Elliott, and actually I should be quiet because Melanie's the lead.
Thank you. When you look at this is a really elegant way to redistribute funds and make sure that the northern areas are seeing a greater share of this. given their lack of service areas. So I don't really philosophically want to change it too much. But the question that I sort of wanted to put to staff is that we do have things in the strategic plan, and we are trying to build the capacity of the SLRD generally. And so I just want to make sure that when we look at the regional section, we're putting any leftover increase. Like, does more need to go into land use planning, or should it really be going into the general government, because we've been trying to grow staff capacity and positions there that benefit the whole region?
Yeah, I think that we could adjust general government and planning. They are the same pocket per se, the same funding pocket. So everybody pays into both equally. There's no one portion of the SLRD that aren't a part of both of those services. So that could be adjusted. And then the tax increase would show up as land planning versus general government. But it's, like I said, it's the same pocket, really.
But to add to that, in response to your request, what's happening currently is because of, yes, it's an elegantly set thing, but in terms of real dollars, the amount that's available for that regional piece, whether it's general government or land use funding, is actually being eroded slightly each year, because there's a certain percent that's going directly into the PILT, and therefore, like the estimates that Suzanne has between her page 6 and page 8 back on the other spreadsheet, there's actually a lower percentage and a lower value that would be resulting from general government based on the current estimates. So if the intent was to at least continue to keep pace with the amount that goes into that general government envelope, that Suzanne's suggestion at the very beginning to consider an incremental increase annually there, so that at least keeps pace. And it could be increased as well if that was the desire of the board, but that would have to be something the board as a whole would want to do.
And then I know there were questions about the select funds, but don't the PILT funds have more flexibility in how they can be allocated?
It's pretty similar, although the PILT has a little bit more of stricter language for the northern PILT, where they specifically requested not for special projects or for grants and aid. So it was just for services of the SLRD. And I don't have background on why that was decided, but that's the language that's in the policy, and it's different from the District of Squamish's Southern PILT language, which is basically for any kind of service for both District of Squamish and Area D.
Thank you.
And that was, I think, going to be addressed. Potentially, we have that as an option to change the language there for the northern PILT.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought all the upgrades that are happening in the northern region on hydro system are about generating more power. And so wouldn't we expect to see these contributions go up as those upgrades are finished?
A lot of those upgrades are to do with just basic maintenance, right? I don't know if there's going to be a quantity of power increase so much as maintaining what we've got.
Yeah, but whatever the actual consumption is, that we have been seeing an increase, and it's actually been higher than the CPI increase. So whatever that actual consumption is, that's what would be received by us. We don't really have direction or control over that, but we benefit from it. So I did have Director Birch-Jones and then Director Demare.
Thank you. In response to what Suzanne was saying, I'd be very pleased if we had language more like they have in the South for our northern PILT. I was super frustrated when I couldn't use PILT funding for the cultural feasibility study couple of years ago a request for $15,000, and I thought that would be a perfect fit for that fund, but I couldn't because we didn't have an associated service area. So if we had a bit more flexibility, like there was a category called special projects, but we don't ever seem to have used that. And I'm not sure how meaningful it is, but less restrictions on that money would suit me, as they have in the South. I'm pretty sure Director Demare would agree.
So we're going to go to him next if you're finished. And Pip, if you could just capture that to broaden the language for use of Northern Pelt funds. Director Demare?
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to see. And if we get that, then I wouldn't need to increase the select funds. I don't think there's any need for it. Because, you know, I'm planning to, like I mentioned before, part of that OCP process is to get buy-in for a couple other services.
Perfect. I noted that.
Yep.
I'm just looking up the BC Hydro Authority Act because it talks about how they apportion these tilt amounts. So I'm just going to review for Karen Elliott's comment earlier about will they increase now that they're actually enhancing those services in the areas A and B.
Thank you, Suzanne. Director Rainbow?
I know we're discussing BC Hydro Pilt, but where does CN Rail fit into this? Or it doesn't fit into this, but what do we get from them? And how do we allocate that? Because I'm not clear on that. I thought it was the same kind of process that they don't pay taxes, but they give us money in lieu of taxes.
Yes, that's correct. We are so far receiving about just $11,000 annually. So it's very little from CN for BC Rail payments in lieu of taxes. They've been selling off their properties. And so their goal was to actually continue to sell off. The last time I heard from BC Hydro representatives, it was a very small amount compared to the 1.5 million.
Okay. Director Demare?
Just on the topic of power generation with the Bridge River system, the generators were quite old and they had to ramp them down a little bit over the years. So there will be an increase in power generation once they get everything up and running. And you see that they're delayed now with some of the upgrades on the generator projects due to some government requirements, but it will increase. The power generation will increase once all the projects are done.
Thank you. Okay, so do we have anything further in terms of thoughts on the changes that we want to consider? Or have we captured it all now? Seeing none, it appears we've captured it all. Before we do too much analysis, I want to just see with Director LaFrance if, as she's been trying to review this, to see how much time she thinks she might need for that.
So I haven't been able to find the formula that BC Hydro uses. It's not in their act, but I could contact them just for curiosity's sake of how they actually develop their apportionments to each area.
Perfect, thank you. That would be great. And I'm sure we could bring that back again to the committee of the whole or a board meeting for future reference, especially because I think there's going to be a recommendation to the board for a policy change coming out of this, and that could be brought back at the same time for consideration. So if that's the case, then if we could maybe take a look next at the different ideas that are up here that were thrown up sort of as a brainstorming, and see which ones we want to try to amalgamate into the policy itself for direction to staff to come back with proposed policy changes. It's not that we have to go in any particular order, but I think some of them look like they are fairly, there's a good consensus on from the particular people. I'm just going to move these two here, the Northern Pilt applying to special projects and changing the language so that it's more like the Southern Pilt. It appears that I've heard from at least 2 out of the 3 Northern Pilt directors. Is that looking interesting to all 3 of you? Director Wiebe, did you want to weigh in on that?
I'm sorry, I got taken away by an important phone call, so I missed bits and pieces here. I think changing the language would be helpful. I wish I could ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars in increase, but I know that's not favorable. So no, I'm fine with the direction that things are headed.
Okay, thank you. So that's good. So I think that this appears that, is there anybody who would in some fashion object to that language change being incorporated into a policy change that would be brought back to a future meeting? Director Rainbow?
I don't object. I'm suggesting that when you review the language for the North and South, maybe change the language in the Southern Pilt as well, if necessary, just so that you have a consistent thing for North and South. The Southern one might not be perfect, is what I'm saying. So take a look at it.
Okay, so just give me 1 second. I'm just capturing that and putting it in the same column there, so we can look at that one as well. Perfect, thank you. So then we did have a discussion about the increase to the select funds annually. I think that was the one that came from Director Demare, and he said now that he's happy due to the other changes. So would that be one that we maybe put aside rather than including in the policy change, Director Demare? Would that be appropriate?
Yes, exactly.
Perfect, thank you. And is there anyone else who looked at that item and said, I want that item and would like to see that handled differently? Or is that okay to not include it in a policy update? Okay.
From Area D, I'm fine with that, with the way it is right now. Just leave it.
Okay, thank you. And Director Mack is nodding.
Yeah, I'm fine with the way it is.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So that one I'll leave over there. We also had a discussion from Area D about the library. And I think it's leaning right now to keeping the flexibility. But there was kind of 2 pieces to it. There was the piece about should there be a major adjustment, but there's also the piece which maybe ties into the first bullet about incremental increases to all areas that Director LaFrance brought up as part of her report. And so we've still got these 2. These 2 are maybe related to each other. Should there be something, a mechanism that gives like a CPI or something to make sure that we're not eroding what's going into service areas? Is that something that the board would like to see incorporated in some fashion into the policy? Or should we leave it kind of, I'm seeing a nod from Director Birch Jones. Director Elliott and then Director Rainbow.
I think for me, I would like to see the Southern Pelt annual increase go across the public library as well as our Pilt fund. So that the Squamish library piece grows year to year.
Okay, thank you. And so for the Northern, do we want to do the same thing with the rec center and the fire protection area?
Yes, at a minimum, yes, please.
And Director Demare and Director Wiebe, does that make sense?
I've stated already that I would prefer the Northern Belt to stay the way it is for now. I'd like to see the increase in 2025 where it is, and then look at this again to consider, increases across the Northern Belt, all of it. I'm trying to get it built up to that $200,000 level, which is going to be close to in 2025.
Okay. So we've got a little bit different viewpoint there. So we can come back to that one and discuss it a little bit more, because I did have Director Rainbow on the books as the next speaker, and then let you guys think about the North.
Yeah, with regard
Director
to
Rainbow.
Thank you. With regard to the Southern Pilt, I'm okay with that. I would have, as I suggested, something different, but I'm happy to go along with what Director Elliott is suggesting, so that the library will know for sure that they're getting an increase each year, and they can rely on that. And then we can decide on a year-to-year basis if we want to support the library to a greater extent. So I'm happy with that suggestion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So then this item will have been addressed by that, and we can keep it here and move the other preliminary bullet over a little bit. So the increase in contribution to the Lillooet Rec Center, we don't have a consensus on. And then there was also the question about, do we want to permit some level of increase to general government so that it's not eroded, or is that okay to do? So the impact is that if it increases annually, it will at least keep pace with inflation. If it doesn't, that creates a need for increased taxation annually in order to offset that cost. So there's kind of some pros and cons to that, but I'd be interested to hear where you would like to go with that. Director Wiebe?
Like I said, I kind of missed part of this conversation due to a phone call. I'm curious. I don't know enough about the PILT funds and how they work. I know that the rec center can use any kind of help we can get to keep this thing open. We can't expect volunteers every year to drum up $200,000. But I guess my question is, what are we working on in the other area of the South that we want to get this up to 200,000 rather than upping the funds that go through to the rec center? I'm just kind of not sure. I'm not sure where Sal is, I guess Director Demare is coming from, and I didn't quite hear Director Jones' comment on it. Birch Jones, sorry, Vivian.
Okay, so Director Demare and Director Birch-Jones, do you want to engage on that?
Yeah. Yeah, you missed out on my conversation, is that I'm trying to get more of the Valley engaged. I've got the Marshall Valley group engaged. I've got the La Joya Lake group engaged. Still need to get the Goldbridge community engaged. They actually, that community does not have any legal organization or a society or whatever. The other two joined the BRVCA and under the umbrella group, which probably has 8 or 9 committees now underneath them. So they all share in the insurance packages, work safe, all the other things. So the things are being done legally. Goldbridge still is not. And I want to create a couple of more tax requisitions, and so that they can use that PIL fund also. So that's why it's important that we get up to that 200,000. We don't have a municipality. We don't have staff. We don't have any of that. It's all volunteers and a few paid staff members that deal with everything that we have in the valley and dealing with. So it's imperative that for me to get to that $200,000 level so that we can move this community forward. And that's why. So the other issue I see is that we're increasing staff quite a bit. So where's all that extra money going to come from to pay the staff? So I hear what Melanie and Suzanne are saying, that, you know, to look at that general government and land use planning and PILT and see if we can't increase it. Because with inflation and everything else and so on and so forth, where's all this extra money going to come from? So it's going to have to come from the taxpayers. So it puts us in a dilemma. What are we going to do? So, yeah, but for me, my main goal is to help our community, help our community grow and become, you know, a singular community, not these little individual pockets that we have currently.
First, I'll see if Director Birch-Jones had any response to Director Weeb, and then I'll go to Director Elliott.
Okay, I definitely do not want to see a larger percentage of this northern PILT funding anyway, going into general government and land use planning. I feel I really would like to get that base amount for the Lillooet Rec Center up above 0.8%. I don't think we're going to do that today, clearly, but in the meantime, at least have the flexibility in the remaining Area B PILT funds, just like I do with Lillooet Agriculture and Food. I can do the same with the Rec Center, and I will. So I can live with this. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so that, in other words, just so that I understand it, it sounds similar to what the discussion was between Squamish and Area D, that if we have a broader definition, then there could be an ability to use either select or PILT to work with Lillooet. Would that be the correct understanding?
Yes, thank you, Melanie. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be sure I'm understanding correctly what it is. And does that make sense as well, Director Weeb? Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this piece is very similar then to the Squamish Library piece over here. So I'm just going to move that. And then I will go to Director Elliott.
Yeah, I want to support the area directors in the north and their desire to see those PILT funds come up, because what is supporting our our other, so our general government and land use planning is that the growth in our municipalities is already through non-market change, contributing quite a bit more to these areas through our annual requisitions. So if you look at it that way, that the non-market change growth can help support an increasing revenue stream into general government land use planning and allow the PILT funds to be distributed this way till 2025 until we rebalance them potentially. And I think that's what Director Demare is trying to get at is with a few tweaks, but not necessarily in policy, not necessarily changing the allocation, we can allow non-market growth in our municipalities to support the growth we need on the general government and land use planning fund. And I'm okay with that.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't know if that's generally how that's been looked at. We did put the non-market change in for 2021, but I think historically we've just collected what we need rather than looking at the non-market change as new money that doesn't get included in the tax increase piece. Before we go to Director Rainbow, did you want to weigh in at all on our how we look at that tax implication piece and the non-market changes impact into the annual tax planning process? Suzanne?
Sorry about that, Melanie. Can you repeat the question? I apologize.
Yeah, so Director Elliott was talking about how non-market change plays such a role because it provides us with new dollars rather than increased taxation that could be used to offset some of the costs like general government and land use planning, and that she was comfortable with that occurring because there's so much growth going on within the municipalities and the entire region contributes to those areas. But our use of non-market change is not really, we haven't typically just pulled out the non-market change as being distinct from the increases in taxation.
Yeah, so the non-market change is a little bit weird with regional districts. I have a hard time finding where the land actually is that these non-market. So I do report with the budget on non-market changes, and that has to do with when I receive the completed rule, which isn't until December. And I really don't have an idea of what any of the non-market changes would be at this time.
Right. So yeah, it's something we get, but it's not exactly the same as what the municipalities get that they can use and say, well, these are new dollars that we can use in our budget that doesn't touch the existing tax base. It's not quite as clear cut.
It's not as clear cut, that's right.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It's still helpful though, because it means that we're not taking, so if there's a 5% increase in non-market change, that gives us 5% more dollars in some fashion. That doesn't result in a tax increase to the existing taxpayers. So it's still a benefit regardless. Yeah, so that's good, thank you.
Yeah.
Then we will go to Director Rainbow and then Director Pettengill.
Thank you. Just looking at the chart there, my thoughts would be that we keep the percentages exactly the way they are right now, but that we provide more flexibility for areas A and B. I didn't realize that they were so tied with how they could use the PILT funds. But if we increase the flexibility, then area A, for example, could put whatever money they wanted to into the rec center. And so at the moment, though, keep the percentages the way they are, create the extra flexibility, and then look at reducing the percentages allocated to general government and land use planning over the next, say, up to 2025 when we have to renew this. And if we can if we can reduce general government to 33% and reduce land use planning to 20%, then that gives us a few percentage points that we could allocate somewhere else. to perhaps the rec center, to the library and so on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I can respond to that, just to clarify. So currently, there is no additional funding going to planning at all. That has been stagnant. And the general government only receives an increase right now when it's over a 4% incremental increase. So it really hasn't changed much either. So those amounts don't change, but the total allocation percentage does decrease naturally because the bulk of the amounts will still continue, the incremental increases will still continue to go to the northern and southern kilts. So naturally that will happen without having to deduct any funding from general government.
Okay. Okay. But we could deduct from we could accelerate that change if we wanted to.
We can look at that, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll go to Director Pettingill, then Director Richmond.
Yeah, and I think Director Rainbow is getting at sort of what I was trying to understand. So I understand there's some discussion like within the North allocation of money, we're talking about some policy changes to see how that splits up within the North and likewise for in the South region. But at a high level, right now, Hydro every year provides a sum of money, regardless of what that sum of money is. Like in this year, 71% went to the region, 22% to the North, and 7% to the South. And so that ratio of 71, 22, and 7, we've been adjusting that ratio effectively year over year. And so I guess what I'm trying to understand is our intent now to hold that ratio steady, or do we want to, because I think if we don't, there's a new ratio of 2026 of 61%, 30%, and 10% basically. And so I guess what I'm wondering, like, do we have a target ratio if we're not happy with that high level ratio, or are we comfortable with this ratio? And I sort of gathered from Director Rainbow's comment, he was suggesting maybe we're comfortable with the current ratio. And that's what I'm not fully understanding, that high level ratio of where we want to be.
Yeah, so to go back to Director LaFrance's comments earlier, the ratio is kind of the output. We don't control that end. The controlling end is the policy, and it results in that percentage. So if the policy changes are only within the envelope and we make no changes to the overall picture, the 4% and the amount that exceeds 4% goes to general government and nothing else goes to land use planning, it stays stagnant, then those percentages will adjust the way that she outlined in her report. Because that's kind of, nothing in the policy determines that percentage split. It determines only from the income side how we split up the money coming in. So if more money continues to come in and all of that new money is going into the northern and southern pelt, there'll be less as a percentage going into everything else overall. Does that make sense?
Sort of. I guess I'm not understanding though why we couldn't or wouldn't or shouldn't say, like, BC Hydro is going to deliver a sum of money every year, and we want at the end of the day 71% to go to the region, 22% to the North, or whatever that ratio is. That's where we want to end up, and that is our policy. Or is like, and I guess in my head that sort of, defining a ratio kind of makes sense, and then we work backwards from there. And so I'm not understanding if there's a reason we can't do that or why we wouldn't do that.
For sure. Okay, good question. Thank you. So the policy could be set that way instead, that we want these percentages. That has not been historically what's done, and that would be at the discretion of the board if the board wanted to go down the road of changing the policy in that regard.
Chair?
So Director Crompton, I've got Director Richmond, and then I'll put you on the list after him. We'll go to Director Richmond.
Pardon me, thank you. So I'm aligned with Director Elliott's comments in wanting to support the North to build their capacity. Also in terms of the general direction, leaving flexibility within the policy so that they can increase to be it the rec center, library, or otherwise. And I would be supportive of maintaining the status quo the way Suzanne described it in terms of the natural progression of how contributions are made to general government and such, as opposed to actively reducing it on top of that. And the way Suzanne described it, because of those percentages and the way it's going to naturally go down, I think that will allow the North to continue to build their capacity. So I'm supportive of that, but I don't know that I would be into, like I say, actively reducing it as part of the policy.
Okay, thank you. Then we will go to Director Crompton.
We spent an unbelievable amount of time getting to what we have right here, and it took a lot of work by not Director Sal Demare, but Director Debbie Demare to actually get something that takes I think very seriously the need to really transition all of the growth into supporting the North. I think what we have is good. I like the tweaks, but I also know how much work went into getting to the place that we are right now. And if we're going to open it all back up, it seems like we're back into just a lot of work that I think sort of misses the amount of work that went into getting to where we are now. I will say I'm supportive of the tweaks. I think that they make a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you. So, Director Rainbow?
Just a reminder though, that all of the work that went into this and produced this current plan also included the direction that it should be reviewed and reevaluated, and that's part of what we're doing at the moment. So I don't think that there's an intent to just pull it all apart and start again, but we absolutely have to review it, and so.
No argument from me.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, this is great. Thank you. So what I'd like to do is just recap to be sure we've got things in the right spot from the different types of input that you've provided so far. And if I've got this right, then we could take a moment to share this as well to the public, so the public has an opportunity to see the different thoughts that were considered and what we moved forward with and what we didn't. Pip, would you be able to just subtitle the left hand as action, policy changes to be actioned, and the right as items considered not being actioned? And then, so what we've got at this point is that we're going to expand the language for the Northern Pelt so that it's much broader, and also at the same time consider what the language is for the South and bring back some recommendations to provide consistent language for both the North and South that gives a broader discretionary use of those funds for special projects and such. And that for this Southern Pelt allocation, we're going to provide a percentage increase for the Squamish Public Library that would be equal to what goes to Area D and the District of Squamish Pelt annually, so that if it's a certain percentage each year, they'll both go up and keep pace in terms of the percentage increase. Those are the two action categories. That's all sounds correct, and that could be built into a direction to staff in terms of a policy change? Anybody think anything there is off? Perfect. Okay. And then the changes we did discuss but haven't actioned were an increase in allocation to the select funds annually, which is covered off by the PELT. Now, if we broaden the language, the Squamish Public Library was discussed, and there's an option to provide that money, but not an obligation. So it was determined that that could be covered under the use of the PILT funds itself. And the same for the discussion around the Lillooet Rec Center, that fund could be used as part of the discretionary funds annually towards the rec center or other services that are delivered in the area. And there was a discussion about whether there should be an annual increase incrementally to everything. And it was determined that no, we were going to support the growth of the Northern PILT Fund and not do that there at this time. And that general government will fall in the same thing, and we would look to non-market change or other avenues like that to fund the increases that are going on there. So those things were all considered. Those are not going to be part of the policy change that's brought back to the committee for future consideration. Is that part correct as well? Okay, is there anybody that sees anything there that wouldn't be correct? I'm seeing a thumbs up, and I'm seeing people looking like they've had enough of this discussion at this point, I think, which is great work. I think it is a complex topic. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and it's important, as Director Rainbow said, to review this periodically and to make sure it is in the right spot and to make the tweaks that need to be made. So I think then we're at a position where I could turn this back to Director Birch-Jones, and that you may want to consider a recommendation to the board to the items that are listed as policy changes to be actioned, that staff take those away and bring back a draft policy change together with the information that Director Elliott had requested about the BC Hydro, how they allocate the funds in a future staff report. Over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, and
sorry, Director Birch-Jones, I had one thing I forgot to do. If I could have your indulgence for just a moment, would be to share screen this for the benefit of any members of the public who are wondering what you've all been looking at. And if you guys can let me know if you can see that, that would be much appreciated.
Oh, yes, we can.
Okay, so just 1 second for the benefit of the public. The left-hand column are the items that the members of the committee have discussed and are going to look for policy changes to be actioned. The middle column is an excerpt from Director LaFrance's report. You can see on the top right-hand corner, it says page 6 of 29. That was the item within the committee of the whole report that was on the agenda. And then the right-hand column are things that were discussed that were considered but are not going to be actioned. I'll stop the screen share then, if that's all right. And thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, CAO Helmer. And Director Rainbow, I see your hand up.
I'll just move the recommendation that CAO Helmer just outlined for us.
Excellent. Okay. That's moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Mack. Is anyone opposed? Motion carried. All right. So we still have some more work to do and a couple of items that have brought forward from yesterday, I believe. So we should probably take a break here for some food. It's 12:30. Would a 20-minute break be adequate? Or I'm open to suggestions.
Half an hour.
Okay, we'll break till 1 o'clock.
That's 31 minutes actually. But...
We'll have a 31-minute break.
Yep.
Unless you pipe up again, Director Rainbow, and then we'll only have 30 minutes left. We'll recess till 1 o'clock. Thank you. Thanks very much. Philippa and Melanie and Suzanne, etc. Okay. Sign it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you.
Audio back live.
Russell Mack, are you there? Mike, Jack, Tony? No? All right. Well, we don't have quorum.
Mike's here.
Hello, Mike. Point, we're waiting for directors Mac, Rainbow. Okay, excellent. I think I'll call us back to order. I know Director Richmond is here. I'm not sure about Director Crompton or Director Rainbow. But those two can join us. We have quorum. So we're on to item number 6.
Sorry, Chair, I am here. I just was fiddling with my mute button.
Great.
Sorry about that.
Good. Nice to have you here. We're on to number 6, director's reports. I don't believe we have any. Chair's verbal update. I know we do not have that. Decision on late business. I don't think so. I'm looking good. So then at this point, we're going to move into the committee of the whole closed meeting. And I believe we just turn off the live feed. So we'll wait. Yes, Kristen.
Well, thanks, Chair. We need a motion to go into closed, and then I need a few minutes because there's a delay and I need to confirm that it's no longer running. Thanks.
Okay, moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Weeb to go into closed. And no opposition. We'll move into closed then, please.